Could we get a roll call?
Yes. Chair Thompson,
Present.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Present.
Board Member Baltai.
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is oral communications. The public may speak to any item not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Right now, I don't see any raised hands. We have 8 attendees that joined us online, but they don't have their hands raised.
Okay. Great. So we'll move on. Our next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
And no changes at this time.
Okay,
Oh
thank
my
you.
golly. Look at that.
Our next item is city official reports.
Sorry, taking me just an extra second here. Medina, are you able to bring up the agenda? This is the fun of our first hybrid meeting.
It's pretty exciting.
Oh, okay, there. I don't have to turn my camera on. Okay. So good morning. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning. This is our first ARB session that we are running hybrid. So please give us an extra minute as needed. So Medina does have up the schedule for 2022. And you'll see that all of our meetings into the future will be hybrid. And if we go to the next page, Medina. And so this also shows you that March 17th will be our next hearing after this. We will be hearing 2609 Alma, which is a 4-unit project. It's the second formal. So I believe we'll be asking for a recommendation. And then Costalea School will also be on the agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I guess we can move on to our study session, which is item number 2. This is for 901 South California Avenue. Request for a prelim architectural review to allow the demolition of an existing building and the construction of approximately 55,583 square foot office R&D building. I'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Garrett Sauls. I am an associate planner with the current planning team, and I'm going to be making a presentation today about 901 South California Avenue. So let me go ahead and share my screen so those who are joining us on Zoom will be able to see this presentation. Additionally, the applicant is not present today, but they will have their presentation as well, and they are in the Zoom call as well. So they will join. They will have their part that they want to talk about for this project after mine. So as was noted by Chair Thompson, this project is at 901 South California Avenue. Project proposal is to replace the existing building that is on the site at the moment with an existing 2-story building with a new 2-story building. The project will propose to maximize their floor area allowances, and the proposal, as noted in the project plans, identifies that their project will have 55,583 square feet with a 2,476 square foot amenity space that is going to be on the ground floor space or ground floor of the new building. In addition to this new building, the site will be updated related to the parking requirements, any canopy coverage requirements. Additionally, they will add a truer driveway along the south edge of, or the western edge of the property, where currently there is an exit, but it is not a driveway which leads to the front or the back of the property. As this is a preliminary architectural review application, a future application would require a formal project to be submitted for the city to be able to review and ensure that all the plans will conform to the code requirements that we have. Additionally, looking through the plans, the central tower element, which you can see in the image on this screen as well, does exceed the 35-foot height allowance. And so in order to approve the design as shown in the plans at the moment, there would either need to be a variance or a design enhancement exception in order to be considered at that height. The applicant has asked the ARB in the review of the plans to provide comment and direction on the 5 following items related to site circulation, how the cars, pedestrians, and services that they're anticipating to provide work within the site. The architectural appeal is materiality and the massing and how that applies to adjacent properties in the context and how the appearance and the materials proposed work together. Additionally, they wanted to get some input from the ARB about the additional entrance that they're looking to include along California Avenue. Any comments related to project floor area ratio size or parking, or the concept for the added amenities, as well as the landscape concepts that they propose along the 50-foot landscape overlay area, which faces towards California Avenue. So these images that I have here are some renderings that the applicant had provided in their application. So I wanted to just show these off so that any members who might not have looked at the plans, they will be able to see them as well. And here we have an image as well, the material boards. There is a physical board present as well for the ARB members to review. At the moment, the ARB does not need to provide any recommendations on the application, simply provide comments and direction related to any sort of critical issues that they note with the project that they feel would need to be changed in order for a project to be considered in the future at the site. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Can we hear from the applicant?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
great.
Could we
Okay,
ask you
great.
to state and spell your name for the record, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
Sure. My name is Stan Liu, and it's spelled S-T-A-N, last name L-E-W. And I'm an architect and principal with RMW Architecture and Interiors. And we've prepared a brief presentation to the board. And my partner, Steve Worthington, is going to walk us through the slide deck that we'll present here. And just want to say thank you to the board this morning for the comments that we look forward to. And Garrett, are we presenting the deck or will you be running through the deck?
You can go ahead and present them.
I'm okay. We'll go ahead and share
Sure, I
screen.
can do it.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. I'm Steve Worthington. I'm a principal with RMW and partner with Stan. I'm going to review today briefly the site plan, the amenity area that Garrett talked about, the materiality of the project, and the locations of the renderings, and then walk through the renderings. All right, so the first slide is of the site plan, and we are conforming to all the setbacks that are required for the project, where the existing building did not. It actually was closer to the southern property line. We're also improving the vehicular circulation on site, where we're adding a road to the south. So the northern road will be primarily the main entrance for all employees and people coming and going to the parking in the back of the site. And the southern road, which is the new road added, is for services mostly. We've now met the parking requirement of where the existing building did not. The main entrances lobby are along the northern edge, and there's an arcade walk that I'll show you pictures of that lead to a lobby at the center of the site on the northern edge. And so this allows people that are parking in the back, people from ADA stalls, to essentially circulate along a covered walk into the lobby from the east or from the west from the street, and a Uber drop off in front to the lobby, coming from the west. The fitness center, which is the amenity space we're talking about, is located here. This is an image of it. We're thinking of this as a great feature to support not only the non-vehicle use on site, but an amenity for all the tenants. It includes fitness, showers, lockers, and what we're calling the spin room for bikes. Materiality of the project is fairly simple. There's two colors of terracotta shown here. There's manufactured wood panels for both the sunshades and panels in the elevation. Clear glazing and metal in a darker charcoal color that is in exposed, painted steel exposed as part of the project, and mullions. All the materials were selected for their natural and sustainable characteristics, their warmth, their fine scaled architectural expression. And we believe that helps to bridge the scale of the residential community along California. The terracotta is a time-tested building material. It's handsome, it's extremely durable, high quality. It exudes warmth, accepts deep shadowing. And by the nature of the way it's constructed, it's small scaled, so its elements are more in scale with the residential community along the street. The proposed wood products are manufactured of real wood and recycled plastics. The manufacturing process makes the wood extremely durable from UV, weather, etc., requiring minimal maintenance and lasting quality. The wood has a distinct grain-like real wood texture that is a product that looks soft and warm. It's not shiny or slick. And we believe the wood and terracotta palette is complementary and supportive of the scale and varied architecture along California. We have a number of views that we like to walk through, and the views are around the entire project, starting with California Street, the entry drive, the main entries, the lobby areas, and then the garden in the back and views of the service zone. So let me walk you through those. This is the facade that faces the community. And as you can see, the dimensional characteristics of the terracotta are in 1 foot by 5 foot, roughly human scaled elements. This facade is 5 foot deep. It has deep recesses that are there for both scale as well as shading. This is our west facade. So glazing is deeply set back and will get very good shadowing and playfulness on this facade. Starting with the left, this is the entry drive. This is the arcade walk that leads back from the sidewalk to the main lobby entry. This is a proposed tenant entry for the ground floor tenant. And then the scale of these elements are roughly 10, 15, 10, 15. So very much in the scale of residential construction. And so we've purposely done this to kind of fit with the neighborhood. The next slide is on the entry drive, looking at that same facade from an oblique view, and then looking at the arcade that leads back to the atrium lobby. This is right in front, walking into the site from the sidewalk, looking down the arcade and at the potential ground floor tenant entry. So you can see the richness of the materials, the scale, and the warmth, in this image in particular. As one drives or walks along the side, you can see the arcade that is received by an outdoor seating area at the ground, and then a deck on level 2 right above it, and then an entry directly into the atrium. The atrium has been screened with the same wood panels inside the glass to prevent light leak in the evening, so that it adds not only a warmth to the interior space and the exterior, but it also shields from light that might come from the atrium. This is a view looking at that outdoor deck. And we're proposing some tenant amenity spaces in these areas as well. There's a large operable door that opens up to the deck. Another view looking from the arcade that's coming from the parking area in the back. This is how people will approach the project as a tenant coming to the lobby. You can kind of get a glimpse of what it looks like inside the atrium space. The back of the site, this is the entry into the fitness center and spin room. And the same materials we're proposing along the main facades are also proposed along the south facade, which is oh, sorry, pardon me here. I'll just keep going. And then this is the last image that is the garden space that is used by tenants on the ground that is between the parking and the building proper. And this shows the materiality of the sunscreens that are that wood manufactured product that run vertically and horizontally throughout the project. This is a view in the evening along California Street, so you can kind of see what a lot of these elements do to help reduce the amount of light leak in the windows, from reaching the street. Also along the north side, and lastly along the arcade. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this agenda item?
Yes, we have one raised hand, and the person's name is Andrew. Let me quickly unmute him.
Should I stop sharing?
I think it's already been taken from you.
Okay, great.
Andrew, you should be able to share your comments with us now. You just need to unmute yourself as well on your end. I see that he left. I think he had some computer issues because he was trying to unmute and himself.
Okay.
We don't have any raised hands right now.
Let's give it a try if he's there. So our public speaker is not on anymore?
No, maybe he's trying to reset his computer.
Okay, well, I suppose if he does come back, maybe we can get notified. And so we can give him a chance to speak later on.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to ask the board, first, I realized we didn't do disclosures. So are there any disclosures on this item?
Nothing. Well, visited the site. Yeah. And not the boards, but now assume they would be here. And nothing else on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you. As my walk through the site quite a bit 2 days ago.
Great. And I also visited the site. And then I'll ask the board members if they have any questions of the applicant or staff.
I do.
Go ahead, Board Member Balte.
Thank you. First to the applicant, I guess, am I missing something? I don't see a schematic planting plan, and you're asking for feedback on the landscaping. Maybe you could just direct me where that is in the packet. I just wanted to see what you're thinking of for the front landscaping. What kind of plants? Garrett?
Yeah, it's on, I'm looking at the plans right now. It is showing me it's on page 6 out of 32, and I can share my screen and show that as well. It's not, I think, into the depth of information that we may necessarily have during a formal application, such that we have a quantities list per se. But
Yeah, so
can go ahead and
I
show
did
that.
look at this plan and it references a planting plan. That's what I was asking the question about. Okay, well, look, I just wanted to know if something was in here that I didn't see. My second question is for staff regarding the design enhancement exception. Can you speak to why that would be necessary, please?
Certainly. So the allowances in terms of height for buildings in the research park is 35 feet. And I can also show on the screen as well the elevations that we have. That proposal would exceed that 35-foot height allowance. Let me just navigate to it. So in order to be something that could be considered as a part of an approval, it would either need to follow an application with a variance or a design enhancement exception, which allows for potential changes to those heights. When it's specifically for a design enhancement exception, the ARB and staff can make the findings that those elements are adding aesthetically to the building, but are not contributing towards floor area or other aspects that might result in some kind of reduction of like parking requirements, for example. And I'm having issues with the PDF, but as soon as it comes up, I'll share that.
Okay, well, you sort of answered my follow-up, which is, well, first, how much higher than 35 feet is the tower approximately? Secondly, what are the findings that need to be made for the design enhancement exception?
Certainly. I'm still having some issues with the PDF, but I can navigate to our municipal code and show the design enhancement exception findings.
It's 8 feet.
Thank you, Steve.
And
So it would be,
we're
go ahead.
we're proposing the higher elevation for that atrium element, recognizing that as the main lobby, it's midway in the site, midway in the building, and so that it can be recognized as the destination. The added height helps with wayfinding on site.
So I'll ask once more, how much higher than 35 feet is that proposed element? And what are the findings that we required to find to make that happen?
8 feet higher.
Right. So it would be 43 feet to that highest point on that element. And then the design enhancement exception findings are in Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 18.76.050. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show those as well so that anyone who's viewing them will be able to see them as well. So these findings are identified here, and I'll highlight them as I go over through it. So the first finding being that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property or site improvements involved that do not apply generally to property in the same zone district. The granting of the application will enhance the appearance of the site or structure or improve the neighborhood character of the project and preserve an existing or proposed architectural style in a manner which would not otherwise be accomplished through strict application of the minimum requirements of this title and the architectural review findings set forth in 18.76.020. Lastly, that the exception is related to a minor architectural feature or site improvement that will not be detrimental or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity and will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, general welfare, or convenience.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Elizabeth, for indulging me.
Do you have any
Well,
questions?
Jared, is there any limitation as to where that exception is to be placed on a site?
Yeah, so there are some applicability portions within that code as well. Particularly, they focus a lot more attention on not being an opportunity for an applicant to reduce other sort of requirements, again, such as like parking or open space requirements, but to provide maybe tower elements in this example that we're looking at here that might add aesthetically to the building, but again, doesn't result in any sort of increased usable or space that we consider as floor area.
Also, the enhancement is because of the health club itself. Now, the location of that facility, the health club, the exercise space facility, is there any limitation as to where you place it? Is it also something intended to be used by others other than the tenants in the building?
So our code doesn't specify that it has to be in one particular place, for example, and I think that's what you were trying to get a little bit of understanding of. Is there a certain area where it has to be like a focal point at the street facing view? Is that what you were asking about?
No, I'm asking about the exercise space.
Sorry, I apologize. I
Yeah, no,
misheard
okay.
you.
I'm asking is how does it relate to the users, or is it also used? Can it be used by people off-site? Is it? Okay, that's good enough for the moment.
The amenity space would be used by the tenants.
Only the tenants.
Yes.
Okay. Fine.
Okay, I have a question for the applicant. We've been asked to comment on the entry sequence. Where is the entry to the building?
Should I share my screen?
Yes, please. I only ask because in our plans, it's not very clear where the entry is.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is the main lobby. This is the north facade. The parking is back here. California Street is here. And this arcade and that arcade lead to the lobby. This is the main entry for the project. This is also where we're asking for the exception of having the additional 8 feet. It's only here.
Okay, and I see a set of double doors just on the edge of that lobby. So
Yeah, this is the so I can go through. Oh, here, that was a good one. So this is the main lobby. This is California Street. And so this is this arcade leading to the doors here, and there's double doors there that enter the lobby. And this is the element from here to here that we're asking for a little extra height because it's back in the site, and it helps you recognize that it's the main destination. Is that clear? There's the double doors.
yes, it is. So just to clarify, I guess an entry sequence would be that someone would, if they're coming via their car, they would drive through that sort of north driveway, park, and then walk and sort of
And
enter
then walk.
behind.
Then they'd walk right and enter right there.
Okay, gotcha.
And then if somebody was dropped off by Uber, they would drop off right here and walk in. If people are enjoying, eateries in the neighborhood, and walking, they would come from California and would walk along this and in.
Okay. And if they're biking, I guess they would sort of go on the other side and maybe walk around.
Yeah, if they're biking, they would bike down the drive and around to the back, and that's where you park your bike and shower locker.
Okay, that was my first question. Thank you. And I guess you sort of answered my second question, which is why, why is that element taller by that much than the other, like for the DEE, the design justification, just from your perspective?
Yeah, it's just to have greater visibility, from the street, looking back here with the added 8 feet, it's a little bit more pronounced.
Okay, thank you. And then for the terracotta tiles, I just wanted to clarify on the size of the tile.
Yeah, they're 1 foot tall by roughly 5 feet wide. Very modular.
Great. Okay. There's another question. Go ahead.
Yes, in terms of the planning for tenanting the building, is it intended for one company, or is it possible to divide it into, I guess, 2 or 4, or how?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's intended to be multi-tenant, with from anywhere from 2 to 4 tenants.
Right.
So the ground floor is either 1 tenant or 2, and the upper floor is either 1 tenant or 2.
So
that's why the lobby's in the middle.
So at this point, it appears by the plan that there's no kind of enclosure to the floors specifically. Is this going to come later, or depending upon the kind of tenanting you'll be doing?
You mean at the atrium?
In the interior, it's sort of an open plan right at the moment, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, we're not showing any we're not showing any tenant development yet, but
yeah.
there's an entry lobby with a stair going up, and so this area that's light colored would be shared by all tenants, the toilets, and you could have 1 tenant here and 1 tenant there.
Okay.
Any more?
Just one more on this the tower idea here. The tower ultimately is higher than, well, this is a 50-foot height limitation. Is that correct for the zone?
It's
Yes.
35 feet for the building, and then there's another section of our code that allows for 15 feet for a mechanical screen, but it would otherwise not necessarily be a part of the building envelope unless this exception were approved in this area.
Okay, what's the actual height of the glass tower then?
It'd be 43.
43. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. I guess we can I just check one more time if our member of the public has come back?
Yes, Andrew is back. Let me try to promote, to unmute him now.
Yeah,
Yep.
that'd be great.
You should unmute yourself and share your comments with us. Let me also quickly share a timer.
Hey, sorry about that. I raised my hand by mistake. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was by mistake.
Oh, so Andrew did not want to speak on this item.
Andrew, you don't want to speak on this item, right?
Correct.
Is it correct? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Just want to make sure people get heard if they want to be. Okay, well, let's bring it back to the board. This is a study session. So who'd like to start? Do you like to start, Peter?
Sure. I'm happy to jump in on this. Thank you very much. There's a lot of great stuff going on with this building as I see it. I'm really excited by the attention paid to the pedestrian amenities, the way people can sit inside and outside the balcony, the potential seating area at the back. So just as a first shout out, I really like a lot of what I see. So I'll address my comments working through a list, starting with the site planning. And I find that the side entrance works well, and adding the double drive coming back around the other side of the building is a good idea. The continuous flow is nice to have. It creates more efficiency. And I like the way that the pedestrian activity is brought in along the side of the building from California. I think that works well. I also like the way it locates commercial activity, the entrance and stuff further from the street. There's a residential side of the street and a commercial side of the street. And the more you pull the commercial entrances back, the less of an impact you'll have on the residential. So I think that's good. I'd like to see the drop-off area for Ubers, taxis, deliveries and stuff enlarged. I think what you're showing is just too small. In general, in a building this size, you'll have potentially several vehicles, maybe a UPS truck stop for half an hour, that kind of thing. And you really want to anticipate not blocking traffic by having, I'd say, at least space for 3 vehicles. But you have the way to make that work. It just comes together. All that said about the site planning, my big issue is that it seems to me that the paved surface area of the site, the impervious area, is being increased by this project. Certainly not being decreased or not being decreased substantially. That's because you're maintaining the surface parking lot. And I think in this case, the surface parking is functional, but nonetheless, I think it's a real sadness not to see you get parking underground or in some more compact, efficient structure to increase the amount of landscaped area on the site. I think it's better development to get more greenery, more growing things, have less impermeable surfaces. And so I would welcome any studies or efforts you can make to reduce the amount of surface parking on this project. I don't know if I can stress that strongly enough, how important I feel for having less surface parking. The building itself, I find that the side entry is great. When I look at the image on page 19 of the packet given to me, directing my colleagues to that, I just think it's a wonderful composition. It's got some neat balance of terraces and interesting glass structures, and the vertical tower really looks good. Wonderful people spaces, both at the ground level and that terrace up above. It's just wonderful. It's really nice. All that said, I find the front just feels too heavy to me somehow. I appreciate the deeply recessed windows, and I follow the argument about the windows and the openings being of a mass and scale. Perhaps it's more residential, but overall I find it quite large, and really it reads to me as one large block. It's accentuated by the red terracotta covering the whole thing. Mostly it just doesn't feel like a public facade of a building. And as much as you've tried to get the entrance around the side, or you're succeeding at that, the street, the public, the people who drive by still see that one facade that's shown on page 17 of our drawings. And I'm just not buying that that's a suitable facade for a building on California Avenue. That's the main front of this building, and it kind of looks like the side of a building, because it is by your programming. But I'd like to see it somehow more modulated and more like a front building. I'll see what my colleagues have to say about that, but that's my feeling. Somehow I'm just not buying that as a California Avenue facade. I feel the same way about the corner on the back on page 24, where the staircase is. Again, it just feels blocky. Maybe there it's okay. It's in the back of the building if that's the massing strategy for the whole building. But I found that the entry area where you have the glass elements, the lightness, the terraces feel very different, and I think are much more successful. I'd love to see the whole building move in that direction. I also believe that the tall vertical fins on the east facade need a bit more work. They just seem a little bit overscaled, and what you really need there is some more shading for those outdoor pedestrian or people activities to take place. That's going to get pretty strong sunshine until 1 or 2 in the afternoon when people are eating lunch, and yet without any kind of shading or canopies, it'll be intolerable. And it's an opportunity to perhaps break the facade of the building and enhance the public space outside all at the same time. Regarding the fitness bicycle storage area. I think it's a wonderful amenity. It's great to see that being proposed. Unfortunately, where it's located makes it difficult. If I ride my bicycle to work, I then have to walk either through the loading dock to get into the back of the public lobby, or I have to walk around the entire building outside to get to the front of the building. And it seems to me that if it were located so that it had some sort of internal connection or close exterior connection to the main lobby, it would not feel like an afterthought or a secondary type activity. We want to encourage bicycle riding to work, and this location makes that more difficult. As a small thing, I think it's a bad idea to put the spin machines in the bike storage area. I certainly wouldn't like that. You should try to get all that like activity, the exercise stuff, in the same place. I gave a bit of thought to how this fits into the neighborhood. And I guess my only real concern, I think you've done a lot of good moves with trying to be conscious of the massing and the residential character and stuff, but the tall glass entry area, I really would like to see some study as to how bright that will be at night. If it's brightly lit throughout, your rendering doesn't show it, but if it's some sort of a glass box with little veins, it might be very bright at night, and that even from that deep in the site could be annoying to somebody who lives across the street. I just think maybe to staff, it's important just to keep an eye on that. I would be pretty annoyed if I lived across the street and this were brightly lit during the evening. So it's just a heads up to watch out for that. On the materials, it's great to see the physical samples here. I thought the yellow was too yellow, but looking at the sample here, it looks nice. I'm just not sold on the terracotta, though. I think that's a very bright color, and it's used in a bright and massive way to accentuate the facade of the building. And I think that will just be too bright. It's too strong a color. And I'm also not sold how well it works together with the yellow and the brown black metal extrusion. I think it's symptomatic to me of what I'm seeing is sort of two architectural directions here. One is the California Avenue facade with the heavier terracotta with the deeply recessed windows. And then on the side of the building, you have this lighter steel and glass element with terraces and stuff. And I'd recommend you try to bring those two together, at least, so it's not two separate things going at once. But overall, I'm not sold on the brightness of the red. Overall, I think that'll be too much. It's hard to comment on the landscaping because we don't have any sort of proposed planting plan, but my gut feeling at a high level is that there's just not enough landscaping. It's the site is, to my eye, at least 80% impermeable surface, and that's a lot. I will caution you that there's a 50% parking shading requirement, which is challenging to meet, and I think you're going to have to modify the parking sum just to make that work out. Lastly, there are 2 or 3 really nice old palm trees along the side of the property, the left side as you're looking at it from California, and I'd really encourage you to keep those. And then I'll address the design enhancement exception. As much as I like the tower a lot, as an architectural element, and can easily make finding number 2 that it adds to the architectural quality of the building, it certainly does. I'm really hard pressed to see where this property has some exceptional and unique character that doesn't apply to other properties in the neighborhood. I also think this is not a minor feature, it's rather a major feature of this project. So I don't know that I can support the DEE based on the findings that we have to make. I don't want to be misunderstood. I think it's a wonderful feature, and I think it could fit into the neighborhood, and the reasons you're citing are legitimate, but we have to meet these findings, and I find it hard to make finding 1 or 3. I can throw out a side idea, thinking outside of the box, and staff would have to vet this, but if that were a mechanical screening enclosing the top 8 feet of that, and that were where the mechanical equipment was located, that might be suitable. It's a bit of a creative solution perhaps, but I do think it looks good. So again, thank you very much for the overall very nice application, nice things going here, and the attention to the pedestrian amenities is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hirsch?
Could I get just one clarification? I know you had, Board Member Balte had identified that you wanted to bring 2 facades together. Could you repeat which facades you were talking about in terms of the material relationships between them? I just want to make sure that I keep that as a note.
I identified in my mind that there's 2 architectural motifs going. One is what you experience from the California Avenue facade, which is essentially a large mass of a terracotta finished material with deeply recessed windows, the beveled angled pieces. That's repeated at the back, what I call back right corner of the building. And then secondarily, you have the architectural treatment of the glass entry atrium tower, the multiples of terraces, the lightness of the glass and the steel architecture with the recessed balconies, lots of places for people to sit. And in my mind, those are disparate architectural vocabularies. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First, I really like the materiality here. I really like the actual colors and the mix between the red and the tan, and then turning to gray around the sides. I think that what we're not looking at here so exactly is the actual way in which materials meet each other, because they're meeting at a sharp point as you create the recesses in the front of the building. So it would be nice to sort of see how you're going to do that, how you're going to have these materials meet each other in terms of the color and the fabric, the way it fits together. But it's not at that stage yet, so I think it's still time for you to work out those details for a final presentation. But I think that the idea of scaling it down to more of a pedestrian look, in fact, dividing the two floors approximately 50-50 with the fins that come out, really is very successful. It doesn't look like housing, which is a good thing. I'm very appreciative of the terracotta. I just think it's a fantastic material, and I don't see enough of it here. I think it's very well done on the facade. And the fact that it's no more detailed, sort of it has that abstraction with simple cuts and recesses in it, is all the more successful here in an industrial park like this, to kind of fit into kind of without such a specific image, just a strong statement. I think that, based on the program, that you have the possibility of multi-tenants, the idea of having the entry in the middle became obvious to you. And it was a proper decision on the size of this property, so that each of the tenant spaces are of a large scale and easy to configure for either 4 or 2 tenants, and to privatize them, and to have the shared facility on the side makes a lot of sense, so that everybody can get to that socializing balcony and use the site effectively from that side. You can't help but notice that there's this building next door, and it has a kind of an interesting entry to it. It would have been nice if you could have shown us exactly what you're looking out at when you're on the balcony, because there are parts of that building next door that, if they stay, are interesting to look at, and parts that are really not so interesting. Even if they're somehow shaded by trees, you will see the building next door, so it has to relate in some way. The front of the building is kind of intriguing. The back of the building is very mundane. So I wouldn't really want to have that balcony looking at the back of the neighboring building. I note that the actual roadway on that side is shown as going straight, and I gather that is because the property line is actually kind of a shared property line at present, because the previous tenant here of this building also was partially on the neighboring property, and it was used as a kind of an exit. But I just repeat that the back of the building, if it stays, is not at all attractive. The neighboring building, that is. As to Peter's comment, Commissioner Bolte's comment about the bicycle parking, I agree with what he's saying at convenience of the bicycle parking. And I think there's some other consideration you might look at. And since, as I asked whether the exercise and spin room really are part of an outside program, they are not. They're really part of only this program. It seemed to me it would be possible to relocate that to a roof area, that there would be enough space in terms of the height of the building to be able to fit it into a third story, which would be accessible by elevator and could easily benefit by being up in the air. You know, you have windows looking out to the service area from the exercise room. That's not the most attractive view on that side. But if you had the exercise up on the top floor, everybody could get to it very conveniently by elevator. And it could be centrally located. And what would that do to the back of the building? That would allow you to change the shape of that and provide a more landscaped rear yard public area for the tenant at the rear of the building. I know they share in the outer balcony facing, I would say facing north, I guess, sort of northeast. But the possibility of more landscaped area in the back, or in fact, an area which could accommodate bicycles in the back of the building, well, could be very, very certainly considered here. I question, you know, obviously the idea of putting parking under the building is one way of providing more landscaped area, but I think that this site has some features that are kind of okay for allowing the parking to happen in the rear the way you show it. At the very back of the property is some very tall evergreens. They create a kind of a very strong border to the property at the back. And if you really spend a little more time on the landscaping, I think you can really do a more landscape job within the parking lot that you have available. And in fact, if you actually move the exercise room to the roof, then you'd have even more area to deal with as a landscape in the back of the building. I think that's one of the biggest, that is the biggest weakness, in my opinion, of this whole concept here. And that is to provide more landscaping in the back. It's very tight. You have to kind of create a border of raised planting areas in the back that just separate the open space from the rear yard. I'm less enamored of the kind of scale of the whole back of the building than I am of the front of the building or the side of the building. You know, it doesn't have at all a repeat of the scale of the front of the building, and I wonder why. It could have that. There is an illustration somewhere here on a piece of the kind of that's on page 24. A piece of the way it turns the corner there, you know, but then on the opposite side, it looks like it doesn't happen again. It seems to me that, you know, there could be more of the front of the building brought into the back of the building as a look, and that the scale of the middle going 2 stories high, I'm not as enamored of that as I am of the way in which you created a very definitive scale to the front of the building. So why shouldn't the back look more like the front? It's one building after all. Why not try to coordinate them? I make a point in all commercial buildings that it's unfortunate with Palo Alto weather that we don't have more operable windows. You look at that balcony and think about that whole kind of wall opening up. And yet, you know, other than that, this is a sealed tight building and it can't allow for outside air to come in. And all these wonderful, wonderful days here in Palo Alto where the air is great. I just want to point out that I had an office in the Woolworth building in New York City at one time. And guess what? They had operable windows back then. And it's wonderful to open them. And it hasn't been done for the last 50 years now because we have to have sealed buildings, but I just don't think it's necessary. I have to say, I had a discussion with the mayor about that the other day, and he agrees. Nice to have Palo Alto air. So if there is a way in which you can, as it's a preliminary presentation, provide some kind of operable windows into this building, I think you will improve the environment of the inside significantly. Other than that, I really think it's got a lot in its favor here, this project. I wonder if it's possible for you to consider putting the exercise room at the roof, if that's could fit into the scale of the height of the building. Could it allow for 3 floors to? No, not a possibility.
Yeah, I did just want to clarify that rooftop gardens are defined in the code, but they're currently only allowed downtown. So if we were to do such a thing, it would either need to be under the 35 feet or it would need to be a code change that, has a longer discussion.
Well, I think that's unfortunate because, it could be, you could easily accommodate this so that sight lines, you would never, ever see it, the top of the building, you would never see it. So it's not unreasonable to say it can be up to a certain height there, and as long as it isn't seen from the street and is a functionally better, it's a shame that, you have to overcome certain of the zoning. It would be nice to allow that change. So if I have to accept it, then that's the way it'll be. But some other comments that I've made, I think could be considered here. And in particular, looking at number 22 is that whole double story, full height idea here versus the concept of the front of the building, which could actually affect the back in a much better way. I think if there was a repeat of in some way of the idea of the front of the building. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you. All righty. Well, thank you so much to the applicant and staff, and thank you to my fellow board members. Some really great comments. When I first visited the site, the first thing I noticed on the existing building is there's like an entryway and it's like sloped. And I remember peeking the renderings and being like, oh, it's kind of like an homage. There's like this like sloped entry and now we have these sloped windows and there's this kind of consistency, which I thought was kind of nice. On the comments for where the location of the lobby, it's kind of, the lobby is where most of the foot traffic is going to go. And having looked at this for some time, I'm realizing that because of the location of the lobby, you're actually taking a lot of the foot traffic off of the front of the building. And I wonder if that is the right choice. Currently, I kind of heard board member Balte's comment about the California facade being kind of big and monolithic. And currently the building that's there has this big break in the middle where there's the entry. And so it doesn't feel that big. And so I wonder if there is a consideration of relocating the lobby so that you're forcing people to come and have eyes on the street, which I think would be a good thing. I also agree with the bike, the parking of the bikes, that those should be as close to the lobby as possible. Because, well, I love bikes. Bikes are great. And in terms of I think we need to consider at least our power as architects that, we can locate lobbies and we can influence where foot traffic goes. And we need to do that intentionally. So I might encourage the applicant to reconsider that location. I really appreciate Vice Chair Hirsch's comment about operable windows. I love operable windows. I think it's a great thing. And I think there is one side of the facade that looks like it does have operable windows. That's on the sort of north side, I think. So I would encourage that in all ways possible. Yeah, sort of, let me go back to the site for a second as well. I appreciated Board Member Balte's comment about reconsidering the parking. There's a lot of opportunity here. I see this lot is kind of long and thin, and maybe back in the day, having a lot of surface parking made sense. But if the surface parking could incorporate more landscape, make whatever people are looking onto a lot nicer. It's those relationships, I think, that really make a design, because the design is so strong. I think, we've sort of heard from almost everyone here that there's some really strong things that are happening with the design. But the connection to landscape is really what's going to make this building sing, I think. And so I would definitely encourage, the planting plan, I don't think has any species on it. So unfortunately, I don't think we can actually comment on that. But the comment that, can there be more landscape incorporated? Can there be more pervious surfaces throughout the site? Would really encourage the applicant to consider that. On the materials, I'm a huge fan of the terracotta. I'm sorry, Board Member Balte. I think that color is awesome. Big fan. I do think, though, there is something about the relationship with the wood that maybe doesn't quite sit right with me, that maybe the wood, I would be okay if the wood changed tones a little bit to sort of match how awesome the terracotta is. Currently, I think you're right. They are sort of competing a bit. And yeah, maybe to bring terracotta out and have the wood be like a sort of accent feature, as it sort of seems to be in the facade. So I might suggest that. Let's see. For the DEE, I definitely agree with my fellow board members in the sense that I'm not sure that there is sort of an exceptional design circumstance that merits the height that's being asked for. I think especially since the adjacent property is so short on the other side, I do think that there might be a potential problem with how tall that element is. So at the moment, I do think it's lovely, don't get me wrong, that facade's looking really nice, but I think it can still be nice without the height. There might be another way to do that. Let's see. Okay. I think that's the bulk of my comments. But I do think the design is really going in a great direction. I think it'll look really great on that street when it's done. But I do think there's these other tweaks that might just be kind of refining the relationships that are being created on this design. That could be the tweaks. I mean, I will actually also comment. I know my fellow board members sort of made a comment on this backside facade. I guess that is sort of the southeast facade, about being too grand with these big louvers. I do think there's something kind of iconic about that, but maybe just because it's on the side or it's on the back, it feels less important. So I actually don't mind it, but maybe there might be a way to enhance it a little bit more. Maybe breaking up that scale. Okay, well, I did think we agreed on a lot of stuff. I might sort of open it up in case there's any follow-up comments. Either Board Member Balte or Vice Chair Hirsch. And then I'd want to summarize everything that we said for the applicant.
I guess Osma, I would, maybe it's worth a discussion between the three of us regarding whether the entrance lobby is on the side of the building or the front, as you suggested. That's a rather large change for the applicant to make, and it's probably fair to give them clear guidance on that. In my opinion, having the entrance on the side facilitates so many programming elements and the way we do modern drop-off and delivery to buildings. And so many other things are really positive about that you really can't get on the front as well. That I'm okay with it as long as the facade of the building is somehow broken up a little bit more, but maybe we should try to be clear on that.
What do you think, Vice Chair Hirsch?
I just, again, focusing on this piece of the building that the
I think you gotta get
Exercise-
closer to the
exercise.
microphone.
exercise room. I wonder if it couldn't be freestanding.
Are we talking about the lobby? We're talking about the lobby.
We're just talking about the lobby now?
Yeah, just
That's
the,
all?
just the
Okay.
location. There was
Okay,
a suggestion
just the
to,
tower, et cetera, that
well,
piece.
I had a suggestion to relocate the lobby to the front to help
Okay,
break up
fine.
that facade. And then Board Member Belte makes a good point about how drop off
Okay, fine.
makes sense on the
You know,
side.
It really responds to the program, I think. And I don't think there's much flexibility here. I don't think it would make sense to have a corridor in the building from the front of the building in this particular idea of the way in which the plan works for the possibility of 2 or 4 tenants, the way I saw it from the very beginning. And I really think that the tower is far enough back so that as it might be considered kind of a eyesore in some way because it's so light or whatever, because I don't think it is barely going to be seen from the street. It's going to be a sort of a monitor that says this is where it is. I'm sure you have to have signage as well at the front of the lot to say enter, you know, at this point in order to go down. I think it's the proper location, and having created a kind of a balcony amenity and underneath the balcony kind of sitting area, outdoor indoor space, I think is enough. That's plenty, and it will be appreciated by people visiting this building. And by separating the service completely on the opposite side, I think that's appropriate.
Okay,
So-
so it sounds like, take a straw poll, the lobby is okay.
Yeah.
In its general location. Okay. Was there any other things that we discussed? I think we all sort of talked about the landscaping to sort of increase
Yes, I mean,
landscaping.
I would like to talk a little bit more about that too, because I think it's possible that since it's almost difficult to get to the exercise room from the front tenants, you know, it wouldn't be unreasonable to create some separate structure that might be the exercise room. Maybe it's even possible to change the whole arrangement of the parking and create that as a separate structure and pull the building in the back to account for that particular space. And then expand the area between the building and the parking, you know, in some way. I think there could be a redesign, because it's sort of a tag-on piece that just doesn't really, to me, doesn't really fit that well. It's just stuck there. So then maybe it should be all the way in the back, and in between it and the building is an outdoor space that isn't even facing a parking lot, and doesn't have to be separated from it. In other words, if the exercise room was a separate structure on the site. Just a thought as to how that might be dealt with.
So, sorry, I'm just gonna try and summarize. So there's kind of 2 items here that I heard you talk about. One was related to the parking, and it kind of reminded me of Board Member Balte's suggestion
So
for
the
putting parking underground.
I don't see that it's a requirement for this property.
For putting parking under, but you
You
just
know,
suggested
there's-
making it into its own
I think
structure.
Yeah, no, I don't think it needs to be underground here if it satisfies the needs. As long as the parking lot itself is really well landscaped.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't feel underground parking is required for some other functional necessity in this case. The parking works perfectly fine, so it's beyond our purview to require that. I'm just pointing out that There's an awful lot of impermeable surface here because of the surface parking,
Mhm.
and that's not a good thing.
Okay, so at least in terms of coalesce direction to the applicant, I mean, I would support encouraging the applicant to consider that, parking underground, but I think you're right, it's not something we can force
It could also be a two-story parking structure at the back of the property, something different. Just anything to sort of compact the parking and get more,
It's possible.
more landscape area.
or above grade structure.
Except, but you probably would push it pretty far back in the lot if that were the case. And that comes with its own issues as well.
Okay, and then, sorry, just to put the fitness issue thing to bed. So you're suggesting relocating fitness location and maybe putting it somewhere else in the building so that
No, well,
landscape.
actually, I don't think it, I think it kind of is a standalone area. I mean, it could have its own adjacent gardening areas that have relate to it. It could also create a kind of a barrier between the building and the parking, which is behind it in some
Mhm.
way. It's a pretty thin structure, so it could be a thin, long structure, kind of the width of the lot. And all of those facilities are all sort of together, the spin room, et cetera, all of that kind of combined. And it could create a separation between it and the building that is really then a landscape in almost interior-like space, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Open space to the sky, that is.
Do you have thoughts on the fitness amenity?
Well, I think those are very creative ideas, David, and if I were the
I always
architect
take it one
6
step.
months ago, I might have taken a look at that. I think that this fitness area is a fantastic amenity, and we're lucky that the applicant is proposing such a nice amenity, and we should really encourage that. That's a great thing
Yeah,
for the building tenants and for
I
the
do
city.
agree.
So I don't want to push too hard to go beyond what's already good.
Okay.
My sole comment is that it needs to be more closely integrated with the entrance of the building so that the activities of the bike riders feel like a primary activity.
I could support that comment about bringing it closer to the
Well,
front.
yeah,
I mean,
you know.
I think your comment, Board Member Hirsch, about like a fitness center when you're just looking at drab, concrete and stuff, it's like tougher to work out when you have sort of rough surroundings. I can appreciate wanting to integrate nature in some way into the fitness center. And I think that biophilic, thing that we all really like. Maybe it's not physical landscaping. Maybe I think that's something that we like about the material palette is that there's this biophilic element to it. It's kind of natural materials, natural colors. So I think I could support just encouraging the applicant to consider that as part of the design of the fitness center. If that sounds good to you. Okay. Let's talk about the facades really quick. So we had some comments on the facade. I want to give the applicant some more direct feedback on that. We sort of both had comments on the front facade sort of being monolithic. Is that something that we all believe in?
Well, I'd just like to see some of the front in the back, more of the front in the back. I mean, I think the materials are nice the way they meet, if they can meet properly, and that they ought to therefore carry that concept through to the back. It's a nicer concept in the back as it is now, much nicer in my mind. It has scale. And the back does not right now.
Any thoughts about the back being kind of cool though, because of how big it is?
You couldn't disagree.
I think it's kind of fun. But I really like the front facade too. I think they're really nice patterns in general. Any other thoughts on the facade, Board Member Walter?
I think I've said my piece on that.
Okay. And last thing on the materials, I heard two of us really liking the terracotta. I made a comment about the wood potentially sort of softening a bit. Is there any concurrence on that?
Yes, I think your comments about the way it related to the wood is correct. I caution you two that this red is really bright, and you're talking a very large building with a very bright color. So it looks great here as a chip. It's great as a concept, but think of the people who live there.
Noted. I mean, I do wear red all the time, so maybe I'm biased. I think it'll be great. All right, I might ask the applicant if they have any questions of us.
Osma, is it worth getting a clear direction on the design enhancement exception? I didn't hear Board Member Hirsch chime in on his opinion regarding the findings, if you could support them.
Yes. Board Member Hirsch, do you support?
Well, I think that I think it's a reasonable idea is to use that exception to create a little bit higher entry is effective. And I'm
Okay.
for it.
I think Board Member Balte and I felt like there wasn't anything terribly exceptional that could justify it. So would you be disagreeing with us in that way? Unless, I mean, tell me if I'm not saying that.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I've been this whole meeting trying to point out that it's not whether we like it, it's whether it meets the findings. Can we make the required findings that the property has something exceptional, that this is a minor, not a major feature, and that it enhances the architecture? Those are the three findings.
Well, I asked planning, presented it to us as if it's possible. So if they've looked at the findings, I don't want to use our findings to beat up on everything that comes along. I think that there's a reasonable exceptions that provide amenities like this one. It's really rather nice to not have to go all the way down to El Camino in order to go to an exercise space.
But the DEE is not the exercise space. The DEE is for the lobby, the 43-foot high lobby.
Yes. Fine. I think that's an exception that would be allowed, should be
Okay.
allowed.
So the board's kind of split on that, I guess, since two of us don't feel that way.
I really like the glassed in lobby.
I think we all like it. I think we like the glass thing. I think it's
Okay.
just that can be achieved without having to get to the height. I think that's where I'm coming from.
I
on that.
don't feel that way. I think it's considered, the height is properly considered. I think it meets kind of the parapet height. Is that correct? Not the parapet, but the enclosure of the mechanicals above.
Yeah, it's less than the mechanical screen height.
Right. It's less than the mechanical screen. So how can you object to that?
David, I'm just trying to meet the findings,
Yeah.
and I find it's hard based on the words they're using. My concern is actually the precedent we set. Everybody would be asking for design enhancement exceptions for every feature they want on a building, and it's, I believe, important to hold the line to the way the council has written the law.
We'd have to go back and look over the words of the findings 1 and 2 in that case and consider whether being a little bit liberal in some cases, like for a stair tower that's only of a limited dimension, does that really affect a building of this size? Is it really so critical? It's a very small element, but it's a very important one. So I accept it for that, for its particular use.
Well, luckily, we're not making a motion right now.
Right.
Luckily for the applicant.
This is a valuable discussion, Osman.
It is.
really
Yeah. Is there any other thing that I haven't summarized? I have 8 points in front of me. Anything else?
I guess I would note, at least Board Member Balte had noted about potential light spillover concerns that he had for the front facade. And it would be good to hear the ARB's opinions on whether that needs to be treated more. In the images that they have, it might be a little bit hard to see in their night images that they're trying to provide, but they are trying to provide wood slats along those windows so that it will try to interrupt some light to come out of it. But it would be good to hear the ARB's feedback on that as an approach to try to limit light spillover from the front facade onto residential properties.
That's from the light tower?
From, well,
from
they
the-
do
the
that,
whole
they
facade?
apply that at the light tower as well. Hopefully the PDF will work with me so I can show that to you. They do that at the light tower as well. But there are also those pieces put, or those elements put, oops, sorry, wrong screen.
I see
sorry.
on page 25. We've
Right.
got some,
On
it looks
25?
like blinds or something on the inside.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and zoom in here to show you. So this is the tower element that we're talking about here. And this was one thing that the applicant communicated to me that I think Stanford also had a little bit of concern just in how it might create maybe a glass box or a lantern that might shine out. So in some respects they had, sorry, let me zoom in a little bit better. In some respects, they had wanted to apply this kind of wood slat across to help to limit that in this specific element. And then also they had wanted to do a similar kind of treatment towards the front facade areas. So I'll zoom in here. You can see them a little bit now, but let me just zoom in and show those.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that they also try to utilize the same approach along some of these areas here, up at these higher windows, and then also at these windows closer to the ground floor. But understanding that there are some concerns, and we would certainly look at the light spillover as a part of that as part of the application. There are certain metrics in our code that say that there can't have foot candles beyond a certain degree that go beyond the property line. And applicants are required to submit photometric drawings that demonstrate that compliance. But it would be good to understand if there are some other more serious concerns that the ARB has with this approach.
Any comments?
Well, I'm fully confident that Garrett, you and the staff are going to look at this very carefully. It's been an issue on past Stanford research projects. Applicants have actually gone so far as to put in automated shades with the timer that can't be overridden, that type of thing. So it's a very solvable problem. I think the basic approach to the elevation on California Avenue is correct. It minimizes the glazed area. It will have less of an impact on the neighbors. I'm not as concerned about that. My comment was regarding the entry atrium glass box, call it. Their rendering shows it from an angle where that's been shielded, but if you go slightly to the left along California, I think you might see that quite brightly. And there's houses across the street. I just don't know. I'm just cautioning that it's worth checking. It's not just the facade on the street, but halfway back in the property could potentially cause a problem. It's worth just being sure. That's really my comment. It wasn't that I think there's really a problem. It's just a check.
There is a view of that at night from California.
What page is it?
It's towards, it's the one of the last three of the renders.
Page 26.
26.
26.
Yeah,
There you go.
This is, I noticed this rendering. This is the angle I'm talking about. I'm not terribly convinced that your artistic rendering is necessarily accurate as far as the brightness to the community, but staff is very capable and willing, I'm sure, to check that out.
If to speak a little bit to that, it always sort of, I'm always impressed more by what you see if you're really moving along a street, and so you'll see this perspective view for a millisecond, while you drive up the street.
Unless you live across the street, David, it's all residential on the other side of California.
Well, actually, do you remember looking at that house across the street? There's hardly any windows facing the front.
It's a very notable house. I went over and looked at it quite a bit. But as I walk up and down, that's
about that house across the street.
That's an R1 neighborhood adjacent to the office park. And that's been a source of concern in the
I'll
past.
admit that, we shouldn't look at the house across the street because it could be another house in another 5 years or whatever, and they might want to look at the street. I'll agree with that. But there is a very small kind of perspective view of this building where you will actually, this very view, where you will see that tower prominently from the street, because it's set so far back.
Did anyone?
I really think that prospectively, and as you move along the street, it will be slightly noticed, and they now it's demonstrated, they're intending that the light value from the inside won't really get out of the top of the tower that much. So that's a yet another compromise that they have actually recognized here because of it being in a residential zone, and I think it's successful.
Is there any, do we know what the barrier is between, just north of this and the adjacent property? Because I know the adjacent property is quite low rise, but I don't know if there's like going to be landscape screening or if, because that's another place, because that property is so low rise, you'd be able to see that light box potentially from the street on the adjacent property, depending on what the screening is.
Yeah, so I think those are great questions that we can ask the applicant to do some more homework on and come back as part of their formal application.
Okay. I guess,
Well, through the chair, I'd like to request that the applicant provide us a calculation of the impermeable coverage of the property as it is now, and then what the proposed design is, just as a way of assessing that.
And-
Not the lot coverage by the zoning code, but impermeable coverage. It's paved surfaces that don't let water go through. Is that okay?
I would be in support of that. That's just in there when they come back to us again. So the notes that I have are lobby location has a board majority for its current location. Increased landscaping where possible. Consider adding more operable windows. As far as the material palette goes, there's a majority that approves of the terracotta material, but that the wood material is a bit bright and might require reconsideration. There was an encouragement to consider parking either underground or in an above grade structure to increase landscaping on the site. There was some discussion about the fitness center to also integrate it better with landscape. And also consider relocating it with the bike parking closer to the entry. There was a comment on the front facade that it is monolithic and that there might be some consideration about connecting the sort of 4 different facades aesthetically across the project. For the DEE, there was a board majority that was not in support. And there was a request for the applicant to consider the percentage of impermeable lot coverage when they come back to us again. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I just have one thing, talking about the parking, once again, the thought comes to me that you could recess, of course, the parking in some of the backyard, couldn't you? It doesn't have to be under the building. It could be digging out the backyard and building some of that below grade.
I did mention either underground.
Underground,
Or-
period. Yeah.
or,
Let
yeah.
them think about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Does the applicant have any questions or comments or concerns before we close this item?
Thank you for all your comments.
No questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All righty, well, with that, we
Take a break?
shall move on. Yes, I think let's take a break.
Need to.
All right, let's take what shall we say? 5-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute break. So we'll be back at 10:11, I guess. Thank you. we're coming back to order. So we do have one more item on our study session. That is the California Avenue Street Improvements Parklets. We sort of have two number 3 items on our agenda. Given the time, I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to spend a lot of time on this, at least right now, given how over time we are. I did kind of want to give the board members any kind of, if you guys have something brief that you want to say about the Cal-Ave Street Improvements Parklets study session. I have some thoughts as well, but maybe just a couple minutes if we have some quick things to say, and then we'll move on from this item.
And I'd also like to just summarize that on Monday, council took a vote to keep the Cal-Ave closure until December of 2023. And they were also talking about a process. And so I think we're sort of, doing some preliminary work related to that. Thank you.
That's really good update. Thanks, Jody. Yeah, I'll go really first. I'll go first really quickly. So I went through Cal-Ave, walked up and down after work hours. So it was kind of maybe around 7 o'clock, and had some observations in terms of there are some things that are really successful that are happening on there. And then I do think there are some things that could use improvement in terms of design, in terms of making that space, like a pedestrian only paseo public plaza. So I'm interested in sort of mapping currently what's happening there, and then also doing some interviews and also kind of getting a gauge of the community and sort of their needs as well. I think this is, that's kind of my angle with this. And I think it would be a really exciting feature to Palo Alto. That's something like community led. That's really successful on site. So I did take some pictures, and maybe next time we get to talk about it, I can sort of share some of my observations more in depth.
I'm all for you continuing, Osma. I'd love to hear what your pictures are. Can you see them?
Today?
Well, it's on the agenda today, right?
It is, but
I think you should continue this, or, well, it's an important issue.
it totally is. Yeah. Unfortunately, also, I mean, I don't have my pictures in a way that's easily shareable right now to the screen. But to give some examples, some of the restaurant outdoor spaces, some of them have visibility on both sides, whereas others are really closed off. And so you could be walking in the middle of the street and see no activity when there actually is a lot of activity happening behind those tarps. I think something that we'll have to consider as we're sort of looking at the development of this is also like, where is the optimal location for pedestrian foot traffic? Right now, the sidewalks are those. And so they feel really disparate actually, because you can't actually see on the other side of the sidewalk. And so it might be something worth studying to see if we were to move or encourage pedestrian activity to happen in the middle, what would have to change on the sides. So that was sort of my initial kind of observations, that there would be way more people if everybody was in the center, and it might feel more bustling. But the infrastructure as it stands sort of makes sense that the sidewalks are where people are walking right now. But yeah, I think, so hopefully next time I'll have more to show. Are there any kind of other more thoughts? Vice Chair Hirsch?
How are we going to get it mapped, really? That's to start with, we need a base map somehow, right?
You gotta speak into the.
Speaking, how are we going to get it mapped?
Yeah, we should talk about that. Like, is that something that we want to do ourselves, or is that something we want to work with somebody else on?
What is our charge here?
In this current moment, I think our charge is to sort of develop a framework for how we want to move forward. I mean, the idea is we know that, I guess now we know that Cal-Ave is going to be closed until December of 2023. And there are a lot of improvements and, temporary structures that are being made there. And as part of the ARB, I think we can have some input into how that area develops aesthetically. And I think we should discuss, do we want to start? Oh, Jody's got some pictures she took.
I think that maybe if we did start by doing a plan, maybe it wouldn't be the best bet. Maybe we should talk about a scope of work.
Yeah.
Well, are we being asked to come up with a proposed design or outline of a design, or is it more to spearhead a process that we get a designer to work on? Or is it more just to figure out what the community might really want? I mean, I've had discussions with various council members about this topic, as you know that, Ozma, because I've talked with you about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And my takeaway is that certainly some members of the council would appreciate the ARB branching out what we do and not just do a review of projects, but rather use our expertise to provide guidance to the city for how this might be well developed. That's the gist of our initial discussion here. Where did the pedestrian alleys go? Whether there's visibility into these shops. Those are great questions that needs to be resolved. I'd be strongly in support of having a subcommittee of the ARB tackle this from a design project perspective. That would mean getting input from the community, meeting with perhaps a subcommittee of the council, putting together some sort of a base drawing and a few sketches, and then getting some sort of input. My understanding is that the council feels that we're free architectural help, which we are. And I think that we've been long neglected in that regard. And I think we have a tremendously valuable potential for really strong input. So I'd be all for doing that. I just want to be clear that's what we're doing. Because right now I didn't see anything in the packet here about this topic. I saw your message about looking at something that's been done in San Diego. Certainly all of us have loads of great mental examples. This is something that's done all over the world. But I would support forming a subcommittee on our board, encouraging city council and the planning commission to each do the same and have those subcommittees actually work on this independent of staff as volunteer subcommittees in the town to try to hammer out what might be a good direction. Then it'll be obvious whether we need the city's staff to hire professionals to execute.
Yeah.
But I fear, and what I think a lot of council members fear, is that the moment you make this formal, the first thing we do is get Public Works to send out a request for proposals. We've lost the creative side of it. We've lost the ability to really get serious, meaningful community involvement. Whereas subcommittees, like I'm saying, would really be able to do that. We all are motivated. That's what we live here. We do that. We want that. So my encouragement is that we form that subcommittee, and we strongly encourage others to do it too as part of the design process that we want to spearhead.
So
Go ahead. Yeah.
would that include planning at PTC and arts? Let's say somebody from the art department, art commission. What else? A landscape person of some sort. As part of it, if we could.
I'd encourage the chair of our committee, the chair of the mayor, the chair of other committees to sort of get together and figure out what they think is the proper structure. But if we do something that's a series of subcommittees, so we're not required to have public hearings like this, which is very difficult to do design work in. And that group could also get really firm direction on how important it is to get public input from the merchants and people.
Yeah. Merchants.
But all of that is understandable. I think everybody would agree on the process. It's not controversial. Seems like council's in support of this, but I would encourage again our chair to work on figuring out what's the best way to set it all up, or just do it. Let's make the subcommittee and push back to get this done rather than follow a 2-year process.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I wanted to talk about this as a group, because just as I was walking down Cal Ave the other day, I was like thinking about it, like if this was my project, if this was like a group project, if this was something that was like, what can we do to make this place awesome? I think the first thing is actually scoping, like what, are we kind of, creating a map? Do we have a process for public engagement? Is this something that we can sort of outline of like, if this was a client that, commissioned us to do this project, what would be the steps that we'd want to follow? And that's something I want to work with this group on. Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but because we are 3, can we do subcommittees until we get more people?
Yes, actually, right this minute, we cannot do subcommittees. It would need to be the full board. But we are hopeful that March 11th, I believe that council's meeting to do the interviews for ARB. So we're hopeful in the near future that we'll have additional members.
So in the interim, I think this is our only format to really develop this item. And I'm open to kind of, maybe we give ourselves some homework or something on this.
I remember writing up in one of my discussions with a council member, a sort of an outline of how you might approach this. It's not the first time I've thought about this. So I did write up a 1-page summary of the process an architect might take to tackle this design problem. And it starts, like you said, with defining the scope, figuring out who's giving you input. It's all the basic stuff. I'm happy to share that next time around or not, as you see.
Yeah.
You can form a subcommittee of one, but that's not really doing much more than directing people to do work.
I mean, I think it might be fair if, I think that would be great. And I would love to see that, that write-up that you did. And, I know for me, I have access, to software that would allow me to sort of create a map if we decided to have a base site plan that we wanted to start looking at to kind of see, where our curb to curb width is, how much real estate is really there.
I'm sure all that information is in the city database, and this has been a well-studied street. They just did that tree project. I'm positive Public Works will have good drawings of the whole thing.
So that could be a task, something that I could take on in terms of getting that from the city and developing that.
I think the bigger, more important issue is to try to get some buy-in or understanding that if you could form these subcommittees with these various civic bodies and get everybody to agree that we're going to do that, then you've really started a process that I think is valuable. And it's not something that's often done here, where you're taking volunteer citizens on these boards and commissions, interacting with the council to do something proactive. We're not responding to applications or people doing things, but rather saying, this is what we think we should do. So many times I think of the bridge project crossing the highway, for example, where council decided we're going to go out and do it the formal way. They hire architects and engineers, request for proposals. What comes back gets hashed over by every committee a dozen times. And what gets built is inevitably, if it gets built, a real compromise. Start with us. See if we can propose something that everybody can get excited about, and then figure out how to build it or figure out how to pay for it, whatever it is. It might not be that expensive even, but if you could honestly talk to the mayor, talk to the chair of the PTC, those are the ones you really count on this kind of thing. What other agencies, but really push to do it that way. That would be a change. And I think you need their buy-in, but if you could get it, it'd be a fantastic thing.
There was also an idea of doing a charrette, like a sort of a community outreach charrette, where we get some design ideas and then we could kind of.
Absolutely. You'd want to do that as a means, not just of collecting community input, but a matter of verifying and working with the community. This kind of design project so badly needs everybody's input. On a Saturday where you have a big image of this on the street and we all talk about it, your discussion about whether you have a pedestrian alley down the middle or two of them on the side where the sidewalks are, is a fantastic question. It'd be really, really great to just talk about that with the town. And we're the right format for it. And it won't cost the city a nickel.
Just our weekends. Any other thoughts?
I'm a bit torn actually between whether or not sort of one person with an overview should write up a scope of work and then pass something around and to the rest of us to see. One would be the makeup of the committee that ultimately expands the scope and, for presentation. And that would be one objective, and the other would be the ultimate shape of that committee, to make sure it's inclusive enough and not too inclusive, because it seems to be that we run into problems as a city when we get committees that are just too big and tend tend to have too many varied opinions without mentioning which particular recent experience that has led me to believe that that's not a great idea.
I'm suggesting not forming another committee like the housing committee, but rather have each board have its representatives. So you can have just 2 architecture board members, maybe you say 2 council members and 2 PTC members, and they're informally working together. I think if you do form some formal committee on this, it becomes a slower political process with too many people very quickly. And we're talking about a design process.
Just
And
be careful about committing anybody like council members to it, because two council members for the period of time that it would take, and they've got such a, I mean, I'm always kind of impressed with how they get through their agendas, you know. It's just mind-boggling when you really follow it to determine that they've read all these pages and have comments to make. And now you're asking them to be on some other committee as well.
well, that's fair enough. Maybe council members don't need or want to be
They
involved
don't,
in this.
at the
But
initial phases, they may not
What
need
what
to be
I'm
there.
trying to parse out in my head is that we're trying to create a design process.
Yes.
And what my experience tells me, and what I've observed recently in Palo Alto, is that a committee is not very good at design processes, a large committee.
Mhm.
You get 10 or 15 citizens from all walks of life. It doesn't
Mhm.
work so well. And I think as practicing professionals, it's better to have a smaller group
Yes.
who are perhaps more focused on what the actual tasks are, things like that.
I think it could be something where we develop a process where, I mean, typically if this was like an RFP, the designer would go out, they'd have set times to go out to gain community feedback, incorporate, and then sort of come back and say, this is what we heard. Can we get your feedback again and here again and again and again? And so I think developing that process is really critical, because I think, yeah, like we kind of said, like this community they have agency, you know, they have opinions, we all love CalAv. And, you know, something that was really awesome when I was walking down there was just the music. You know, now that there's music on the street, you walk through and you're hearing jazz on one side and then saxophone, and it keeps going. And there's things that people love that I think as designers, we want to hear from them. So I think it's really important we do that, and we do that equitably across, you know, all of Palo Alto, so that we're really hearing from everyone. But I understand that maybe in the past processes haven't been good, but maybe we can learn from that and think of a process that will work.
Use our expertise as design professionals, that we understand what a good process is or how to structure a group to come up with this. We're talking about a group design process. But if we lead the city on setting this up, we might actually be able to be successful. And my opinion is that it needs to be a limited number of people. I'd say no more than half a dozen. And you would want to just scope out the various agencies to see what, you know, probably the mayor ought to be really involved in making these decisions. But that's what I recommend we do first. I think that's probably even more important than setting up our own subcommittee. And that'll give us a little bit of time to get our full board in place too. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess in the meantime, until we can actually have a subcommittee, I think there's little homework items that I've heard people volunteer to do. So I heard that Board Member Balte might try to draft up a draft process. I've volunteered to work on just a base site plan for something else to begin mapping. I don't want to pressure you, Board Member Hirsch, but if there's anything you'd like to do.
Yeah, I'd like to actually do a little research on what other communities have done, just as you have, the one you pointed out, to continue that in other areas. Just want to mention that I've had some experience with this on actually 2 mall projects. One specific one in Fulton Street in downtown Brooklyn, where we turned it into a busway, you know, and there were a lot of amenities on the street itself. And it was more or less solving the relationship of all of the commercial related, kind of pedestrian related things that happen on the street. But this is, of course, very different. The whole commercial street is different. It is now becoming a people street entirely, almost entirely. So we should look to examples of other people streets all over the world.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm putting you down. Okay, so we all have tasks, and then I guess when we meet next, maybe what we can do is on the next agenda item, we also kind of have a short, like just put this on next meeting's agenda, even though I know that agenda will be packed. But just to kind of see where we are on our homework.
Yeah, this is important but not urgent. So in my book, that goes to the very top. This is important but not urgent, which makes it the very top item.
Great. All right, well, thanks so much. I'm really glad the board is excited about this. I'm excited about this. And yeah, I'm sure if council decides to talk about this again, we'll hear any more updates. Okay, let's move on. Our next item is 250 Cambridge Avenue. This is a request for a minor board level architectural review to allow the renovation of the facade for an existing 3-story office building to create a more inviting public entry and an improved pedestrian experience. Design enhancement exception is included to increase the height of the building to allow for light monitors to be installed on the roof. And I will hand it over to staff. Oh, wait, disclosures, sorry.
I have visited the site several times over the course of this project.
Thank you.
Same. Went back couple of times now to see the street and the building, and actually was shown at one point a completely different scheme. And I think this is probably a good idea, what's coming forward here. So
Okay, so you
without
visited the
any
site.
more comments on it specifically.
Okay. And I have also visited the site as well. Thank you. I know
Hello?
that. I know that. Oh, yeah. it's
Okay, there
working.
it is. Sorry, the button was a little sticky, I guess. Good morning, board. My name is Samuel Gutierrez. I'm the project planner for this project here located at 250 Cambridge. So let me share my screen with everyone. Okay, we'll jump into the presentation. There it is. Perfect. Once again, 250 Cambridge. It is an existing 3-story building, an office building located just a block away from Cal Ave. Funny enough, we were just speaking about that. And it does involve a facade upgrade and updating of the building that exists there. Here you can see a view of the render of the proposed changes. So this would be a minor board level architectural review, again, to update the existing facade. And as mentioned, this is it includes a DEE to allow for minor height increases to create a new light monitors on the roof, which would exceed the height limit by 3 foot 8 inches. A little background on the project here. It is zone CC2R. It is a 15,000 square foot parcel. Sorry, there's a typo there. It's a 3-story commercial building, so ignore the 2. Parking is located on the site below grade and provided in the assessment district. So in the past, when this building was built, I think in 1986, the Cal Ave parking assessment district was active, and part of the parking was provided via the in lieu fees. The adjacent zones, as shown here on the slide, are RM30. Which include a mixture of single-family and multifamily uses behind the building along College Avenue. And then there are PF zones, which include our city parking lot on Cambridge, and then which is directly adjacent to this building. And then the public parking garage that's directly across, as well as other CC2R commercially zoned and occupied by commercial uses. There's a Domino's Pizza next door, for example, I believe, And then there is the grocery store across the street. Here's an image of the building as it exists today. You can see it has kind of a flat form. There's a bit of a recess on the bottom, but it really has two pieces. You have the recess piece on the bottom and the flat, more projecting piece above. The narrow band of windows also kind of more frame the above portion of the building. I related this in the staff report to more of the kind of brutalist architecture of the past, just very simple forms and concrete. And the proposed design changes seek to change the scale of the project, or excuse me, of the building by providing more relief where possible. That would include new glazing and window surrounds, recessed balconies, new ground floor landscaping, and public seating, which currently does not exist. And also the support pillars that you saw in the previous image, which are conical, they are going to be squared. The proposed materials include two types of fiber cement panels, one that's smooth with warm colored panels for the entry, and then another that's textured with more natural colored cement panels for the rest of the facade. Again, here's a rendering of the proposed design, kind of showing the different panels. And here you can see that the proposed design breaks up the building in what looks like three pieces with similar colors and textures, but also differentiating them, thus creating three pieces. They do seem compatible, and it does create more relief in the building and a little more interest than what's previously, or excuse me, what's existing now. And here you can see below, I think there it is, perfect, the mouse cursor does show. The entry has been changed, and there's a new public seating area along the entry, along with new lower planters, again, adding more to the pedestrian scale. Speaking of landscaping and trees, there's existing trees on the site located at the rear of the building. There's 12 of them. They run along the rear property line, which abut the RM30 zone that I mentioned earlier. Those are to remain. Nothing is being proposed for that part of the site. There are also 3 street trees along Cambridge, which are to remain. They are not being removed. The proposed landscaping is limited. Here in this image, it's a blow up of the kind of proposed landscaping in a table. And the kind of landscape plan also is included. The majority of the plants are native California plants. They do have flowering kind of properties, so they do form a suitable habitat for maybe pollinators. They're all low water use plants. One plant in particular is not native, but it is isolated in kind of this center open courtyard, kind of the donut hole of the building. So when reviewing, staff didn't really review that as exterior landscaping. It's more interior. But even with this one non-native plant, again, the majority of the required ARB findings for landscaping seems to be met here with the proposed landscaping. And of course, the revision to the existing planters along Cambridge at the ground floor now includes public seating bench, which kind of organically wraps around the lower recessed entry. Again, access parking, nothing is proposed to change the pedestrian access or vehicle access that exists to the site. There are no changes to the below grade parking facility capacity in terms of vehicular parking. And again, as I mentioned earlier, parking is provided via on-site spaces within the below grade garage and the CalLab assessment district in lieu from the past. The project does include new parking for bicycles. There are 2 racks near the front entry, which provide 4 spaces of parking, and also new bicycle storage room with 11 long-term bicycle spaces within the parking garage that does not occupy an area where a car would have parked. And also includes lockers, which is beneficial for people who would bike to work at this site. And there is an upgrade to the bathrooms proposed where there would feature new showers for employee. Again, a benefit for anyone who does bike to work and commutes. In terms of zoning, the project is zoning compliant. It's not seeking to increase the FAR, but some of the changes in the project do modify the FAR in terms of reducing it slightly, not significantly, approximately 279 square feet. So not a drastic change, but again, not a net increase at all. The project does not change any of the existing setbacks. The building footprint is what it is. And then there is a design enhancement exception that's requested for 2 new rooftop light monitors. They're likened to clear story skylights, which would exceed the maximum height of the building by 3'8". The tallest portion of the building right now existing is the southwestern tower-like feature that actually encloses the rooftop equipment, I believe the elevator cabin, the upper mechanical equipment, and that reaches 42 feet 4 inches. Here's an image, or excuse me, from the plan set, an elevation. I've identified with this call out here in red, the 2 light monitors that are proposed, and also included an image of the roof plan so you can see the location of the 2 light monitors. You could notice there that they don't reach the very edge of the roof. They are offset from the edges, so it'd be actually difficult to actually see these from the street. It's very likely that from the street view and all around the building at the ground level, you'll never know that these are there. You would be able to view them across the street from the parking structure, public parking structure on Cambridge, of course, because you'll be elevated and be able to see. So in terms of DEE, it's allowed per the code for the purposes of allowing a minor exception of the zoning that will either enhance the design or of the proposed project without altering its function or use to the site or impacting surrounding properties. And it would enable the preservation of the architectural style of existing improvements on the site. And in terms of DEE findings when reviewing the request, the rooftop light monitors would not increase the height of the entire building. Again, it's limited to these kind of pop-up clear story windows, basically. And a DEE does allow for minor height changes. The light monitors would not increase the FAR. They would not change the parking required, landscaping, or open space for the site. They do allow for additional natural light to enter into the building without modifying the rear windows or adding side windows to the building, which could impact the backyards of the residential properties that abut the project site. It does enhance the interior of the environment of the building by letting in more natural light. And there is some modest energy savings with these type of windows versus adding additional windows on the side of the building. So the DEE request would not be detrimental or injurious, or approving it would not be detrimental or injurious to the property or improvements. It would not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare or convenience. And with the analysis, or kind of the bullet points of the analysis I just covered, staff believes that the requested DEE is within the context of the DEE process. So we do believe it's something that could be approved. Overall, the project is consistent with several policies in the comp plan, which include policy L 4.4. The project better scales the building for the pedestrian environment, for example, and it does add pretty expansive pedestrian seating at the ground floor where none currently exists. It becomes more inviting of a building. And then also policy T 1.16 and T 15.12.1, which focuses on bicycle amenities and bicycle improvements on the site. And of course, I just covered that they are increasing the parking capacity in terms of bicycle and the associated amenities for those who would cycle to work. Overall, the project meets the applicable findings for approval and is consistent with the zoning, given that the DEE's consistency with the DE intent is there, and that the project's ability for a DE approval, of course. The recommendation that staff presents before the ARB is to recommend approval of the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Good morning. Yes, I do.
Wonderful. Could I ask you to state and spell your name for the record, and then I will start the timer for 10 minutes.
Sure. My name is Heather Young, HeatherYoung, and other members of the team are here, including Aaron Pavitt, AARONPAVITT, who is particularly expert on the project and may be called on by me or one of you to answer a specific question.
Thank you. Please begin.
Oh, thank you. I will share screen. And let me just get to this. We good?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Sam, for your presentation this morning, and good morning to you board members and Chair Thompson. This is 250 Cambridge, and Sam did an excellent job with his overview of the site. So I won't dwell too far on that, but you can see that the building is fitting well within the larger context. As Sam mentioned, the project was originally built in the mid-'80s. And as such, it is now a little bit tired. And our goal was to improve the building over a series of phased projects to bring it into the 21st century. And one of the projects is already completed. Sam mentioned the showers and the toilet rooms as a future project. That's actually a completed project and will indeed support bicyclists who do travel to and from the building. When we look at the existing site, there's a brick sidewalk that was original to the building, some existing cast concrete planters at the entry, a garage entry on the south side or the right-hand side of your image, and a deeply recessed pedestrian entry that leads to an open air courtyard. This design is also a little tired at this stage, and one of our goals was to increase the visibility of the entrance to clearly distinguish it from the garage entry. And so you'll see here that the paving pattern is proposed to be revised, that the brick sidewalk is replaced with a carpet of tile that rolls out from the entrance and into the interior courtyard. And a lighter tone of that tile replaces the concrete at the entry around this new seating area. There is new landscape planting and reshaped planters, which are lowered and more at grade level, and again, more contemporary along the facade. As Sam mentioned, the 3 street trees are proposed to be retained, but the new plantings both in the courtyard and along the building facade as part of the property are proposed to be replaced. The exterior elevation here, you see a fairly dramatic change. The original design was inspired by the Villa Savoie with its freestanding circular columns and its fairly horizontal, heavy floating mass on the 3rd floor. And again, the challenge of distinguishing the entry, the pedestrian entry from the vehicular entry, was something that the owners sought to remedy. And our proposal breaks the facade, the very flat horizontal facade, into 3 distinct features that have an offset in their plane. The building was built right at the property line originally. So we have physically pulled the third floor middle wall back, which you can see in the sections, all attempts to deepen and add complexity to the facade. The third floor is also dramatically different in the increase in the visual proportion of the glazing from the very low horizontal band currently existing to almost a floor to ceiling application. Each of the large openings of glass is framed with a painted bent aluminum form. And at the two sides, there are new terraces recessed into the facade that do have full operable glazing so that those walls can be opened and allow occupants to move freely from the interior to the exterior. At the second floor over the garage, the narrow band of glazing is also replaced with a floor-to-floor framed glass element. The two-story storefront glazing system with the dark tinted glass is replaced with clear glazing, and a new modulation pattern is established for the glazing with large butt glazed elements then articulated with vertical mullioned glazes to add, again, depth, dimension, and complexity to the design of the building. The round columns, which are pure concrete and very structural, are clad with steel plate to take a more rectangular approach to the expressed structure at the front of the building. And at the entrance, rather than the open corner that you see on the far left, there's now a full height wall with a warm wood fiber panel framing and protecting the pedestrian seating area and also framing the entrance. There's also a new signage component noting the building and clearly demarking the entrance into the project. Here you can see some angular views, more from a pedestrian or vehicular scale. The existing facade on the southwest, again, that long linear third floor, very prominent in the speed of the building. And then the proposed elevation with more verticality, a breakdown of the facade, the clear high performance glazing, inviting the occupants to look out, and the ability to see the interior occupants, further revitalizing the street in this area. And then coming from the southeast, the garage still very clearly there, but it being articulated with that third floor balcony, which will be off of a future tenant improvement break room. These are some close-up views. The bottom right, the pedestrian approach, you can see the seating area on the left, the vertically and horizontally oriented fiber cement panels, the new wood soffit and lighting. Directly above that, a detail of the entrance itself, the replaced tile coming out to the curb, clearly denoting the entrance, framed by the new signage and the new clear glaze storefront system. As Sam mentioned, the building, when it was built, was fully FAR compliant. There was no additional FAR or ability to move the entry doors closer to the street. So these several queues have been added to the project and incorporated as a mean to further identify the entry. The lower left, you're seeing a lovely rendering, again, with those materials and the pendant lighting, again, demarking the entrance. And then the upper left, a detail showing the ribbed fiber cement panel, the floor to ceiling glazing and framing, and the steel-clad column detailing. These images clearly demonstrate the differentiation of the materials, the two tones of equitone, the fiber cement panel, the ribbed equitone, as well as the flat, the composite wood cladding, the resista, the warm brown, and the thin set stone tiles. At the middle of the building, you're seeing the SolarBand 90 Starfire glass. It's a very high performance glass system, obviously insulated. That's another big improvement to the project, which is currently monolithic glass, which was what they did at the time. There's a new concrete tile, this board form finish that will go at the back of the planters. That existing wall under the glazing is integral to the building, which is a PT concrete system. So we could not lower that any further. And then over the garage, the same materials in slightly different expressions to again emphasize and further enhance that end of the building.
Architect Young, your time is up.
Thank you.
So if you just have a couple last things to wrap up.
Thank you. These images are completed in your package, the before and after of the wall sections, and then the views at the glazing. The first was at the middle of the building. This is at the balcony, as you can see here at the garage. The bicycle room in the basement, this is part of part of this project, a secure bike area that is close to the elevator, and it would be a big enhancement to the building and its occupants. A nighttime image, again, we do believe this is a great pedestrian enhancement, and I want to thank you for your time and invite you to come back to us with any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public that have comments on this agenda item?
I don't see any raised hands at the moment. We have 6 participants online.
Nothing? Okay. I was going to give them a second, but if there isn't, alrighty, then we'll close this for public comment. Are there any questions of the board, from the board, of the applicant or of staff? No questions from board member Bolte? Right, don't forget to put on your microphone.
Yes, just on the materials board. So the equitone panels are, just take a look at the elevation. Darker equitone panel is on the entry form that is extending outward and also turns the corner as well.
That's correct.
The actual what you would call shadow boxes around the forms of the upstairs level there, top floor. On all of them, are they those enframelments the same color?
Yes, it's that warm neutral gray. It's a bent formed aluminum frame.
Oh, it's gray. Okay.
Yes. It's the same paint color as the steel.
Same paint color as the steel, the painted steel. Okay.
Mhm.
But it's shown here as an extruded aluminum profile. That's not what we should be looking at there, right? For those shadow boxes.
They're different locations. The aluminum is part of the window system, but the shadow boxes are a painted aluminum.
Okay, painted like the painted steel.
Correct.
Okay. And is this equitone a very light material as white as it shows on this sample here?
That is an actual sample.
It is, okay. And does that turn the corner into the parking lot as well? Is that wall surfaced with that same material?
You are asking a question that's going to require me to go back to look at the renderings. I apologize.
Sorry.
There are a lot of subtleties here. The warmer equitone, actually, can I share the screen again? Maybe that would help if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. One moment. And let me go back one. Oops, sorry. So the two equitones, you can see the lighter equitone is on this area. The I don't, it's not dramatically darker, but just for the sake of discussion, I'll call it the darker equitone is framing this mass, and you can see it's returning here. And then at the entry, there's the lighter equitone, the ribbed and flat working together. And then it's the lighter equitone here and the lighter equitone down at the garage end of the building. And it's a little hard to tell, but it's wrapping in there as well. And if I go back a few images to, actually, that was a good one. So here you can see the bent aluminum frames, the same color as the painted steel at the columns.
Good, okay.
And you can see the resista, the wood fiber panels framing the ceiling and the walls at the recessed terrace there.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
That's working.
Okay.
Follow-up question.
To add to this,
Okay.
the flooring or the interior paving areas. So there's a distinction here between the thin set Raven natural, the darker material is the entry that comes all the way out to the street edge.
That's correct. And then the lighter tone is the seating area to the left of that.
Okay. It's a rather subtle change, but it's okay, got it. And that's in contrast with the wood, the resistor. What is the face of the seating then?
It's also wood.
The resistor.
Yes, or if we're very fortunate, natural wood, but it's more likely resista.
Okay. And where is the poured concrete then? At the entry to the garage?
Yeah, it's not poured, it's board. It's a tile product. It actually comes as a plank. It's a manufactured tile. And let me just go to the trying to get a good. You can see it here, and you can see it. It's at the base of the building, cladding the existing poured in place concrete, and it's also this back wall in here.
So what is, because I think at present there's brick all the way down, including the entryway to the parking, or is that concrete as shown there?
I believe it's currently concrete. It's a concrete driveway. You can see it in the photo here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure.
I had another follow-up question on the materials. The I guess the columns that are currently encasing the existing columns, I guess the steel plates.
Yes.
It says that it's a warm gray, a dark gray. Wait, I think it's dark gray. That's okay. I just wanted to confirm. So the dark gray, where it says dark gray, it's the painted steel?
Yes, that's correct.
I see. Okay.
And the steel, what is shown and what looks like steel in the middle of the larger windows between the columns, what material is that and what color?
It's the same painted gray color, and it's again an aluminum shape to match the frame of the larger openings.
I don't understand the answer. The base color of what is like a cross situation where there are four open areas or open glazed areas, those.
If I may, I believe Board
You mean
Member Hirsch.
this?
Board Member Hirsch, I believe, is speaking to the ground floor at the center.
Ground floor in the
Ground
center.
floor, the center here.
Yes, right there.
Okay,
Yes,
so that's-
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So there is airspace. Oh, sorry. Are you talking about this column and this element here?
Yeah.
So this is the glazed curtain wall system. This is a mill finish aluminum, which you have a sample of. This is a shadow box. So this is all part of the glazing wall plane. When you get to the bottom of the glazing wall, there's a concrete, existing concrete wall that will then get this thin set concrete veneer tile applied to it. This column is completely freestanding and detached from the facade, and the existing concrete column will be clad with this new 4 new pieces of plate steel. Those pieces of plate steel, the welded steel, will get this gray paint color finish.
Okay.
Is that warm gray color the same as?
No, and I apologize. This actually makes it much clearer. There are 2 tones of gray. There's a warm gray at the bottom of the building, the bottom 2 floors, and then the upper 2 floors have this lighter gray. My apologies for the confusion.
But all the columns will be the one color.
That's correct.
Any more questions, Board Member Hirsch?
Nope.
You had no questions, right?
Just quickly to the staff, they're proposing to put a new tile finish out across the sidewalk, replacing the existing brick. Will that be permitted?
They would have to apply for an encroachment permit via Public Works, but Public Works had no issue with it.
Don't we have a standard though, where we don't want individual buildings putting specific finishes on their sidewalk in front? I recollect this has come up before us.
I know that this has come up in the past in like downtown in particular, but I'm not quite sure if Cambridge would be under the same standard. I know that Cal Ave in particular, similar to downtown University, has been not a location for the sidewalk, if you will, to be changed by a private party. But
Yes, so generally, if this was University or Cal Ave itself, then we would have more say.
But you don't see any reason why this won't be approved now? I'm just trying to.
no, not that I'm aware of. Public Works voiced no concerns about that when
Okay.
discussed with them.
Thank you.
If I may, the existing brick in front of the building was part of the original project. So technically they're replacing their own sidewalk that they had permitted before.
I had a question. Sorry, thank you. I had a question. So you had mentioned, the previous building is sort of inspired by the Villa Savoie. Can you speak to any other kind of design inspiration for the current proposal in front of us?
Thank you. The clients asked us to bring the building into the 21st century with, again, large glass openings to really bring light into the building, to strip it down to bare essentials of facade and veneer that were clean, crisp, and a bit more articulated than the current design. There is not a precedent if that's what you're looking for.
No, I think that was actually really helpful, just to kind of understand the design goals in that way. So that was very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? All righty. Well, thank you so much. I'll bring this back to the board. Who'd like to go first? David, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Heather. That's the scale, the detail, the relation to the program expressed with a much greater clarity on the outside, a greater variety of materials and textures, simply a much friendlier building. That said, my feeling is there is a lost opportunity where the scale and the detail fall apart. If you compare the image on A17 with a proposed facade material perspective on A26, and I'd like it if we could put those two together on up,
What were those numbers again?
or at least you can look in our
A17 and A26. Thank you.
A26. If you compare those images with the proposed facade material, Medina, maybe you could put up the photo too somehow on our screen.
Yes, Sam's working on it. To 1 second, please.
Yeah. Okay, so then there's a A17 with A26. I don't know if you can fit it on there. Maybe what you would do is you would take away the, well, I don't know if you can do that. Can you divide up the page somehow or reduce these? No. Okay, well, but just get to A26 as well and show it so that we can look at it here. That's A26. There, that one. You look at the picture in the middle there, and then you would, let's say, go back to A17 for just a moment. Okay, so you see your structural floor definition within the frame of the columns, each one of the 3 bays. The centerpiece of that, with a column shown and what appears to be not just details of window details, but rather looks like almost like a structural element with its own shadows in that bay. That's totally glazed over, totally, I mean, from top to bottom. So now if we could just show the mirrored image that I had the photo, yeah. Okay, that's it. That's what's there right now. So it's really like a mirror glass. You really look at that and you see the street across the way. You see the parking lot across the way. The street on elevation shows some trees in full bloom, but what you get is really this kind of disoriented picture of looking at a building and you're really looking at the street across the, it's very disorienting. I find that this idea is very inconsistent, that your actual front on elevation, could we go back to the front elevation? Straight on elevation. Yeah, because this one shows basically the windowed areas in the middle there full height, just the way they are now with some separation in detail, but there's a full height glass window there. Whereas if you look at the detail of the straight elevation, Sam, you can do just a straight elevation. Okay, that upper picture, that's what it could look like. What it could look like if the floor expression was carried through as a hierarchy between the column that goes all the way to the upper level and the actual structure of the floor itself. That is a very pleasing relationship there. The metal framing, while it may not be exactly the composition of the columns, it could be. It could be like a very large channel kind of expressing what the structure is doing beyond. And rather than cover it up with glazing that just goes top to bottom, it really gives scale to the building where it has a double height floor, but it has an intermediate, which it really has. It's describing the inside of the building, the functional relationship of the columns and floor elevation that's consistently running behind it, column point to column point, is expressive of this building. And I find that it's just much more pleasing and scale giving to the whole building as an expression. It really sort of appears again, you know, in your front entry. The element of this follows through the wall, which is now solid for the entry area, and sort of penetrates it. It ought to be expressed. It ought to be seen. It ought to be really the same color, in my opinion, as the column enclosures. And it makes it to me, a much stronger building. It gives definition and scale, which is completely lost in the curtain wall enclosure. It harkens back to a complete lack of the appropriate human scale of the mirrored glass on the existing building. It's a disorienting image. So I would say that looking at the facade, and now that you've explained the materials very carefully to us, a lot of those elements work very, very well. I think that, for example, the scale of the name of the street and the number, you know, on a beam that covers the enclosure there, it comes in the entryway. It's a much better scale to that. So besides this one concern that without dividing that face, you have too much of a remembrance of this two-story totally glazed element there from the original. And so it's just like one great big humongous piece of glazing in each of those openings. And you'll never see the structure except when the sun shines like this. You'll never see it like that. But to express it is just simply incredibly much better than what you're showing. So I have a number of smaller items that I'd like to describe. The entry area, if you look at this, keep this very picture, the one sort of nice thing about this existing building is that you do get some sunlight coming through into that area of the entry with at least a piece of the wall at the parking lot open. And you don't have to have it all the way to the ground. I agree that kind of closing it off from the level at which you would see the cars in the neighboring parking lot makes a lot of sense, but you could certainly have an opening in that wall and bring some natural sunlight when the sun is in that direction into the lobby area. It would be hitting the texture of the wall behind the equitone textured wall. And it will actually, during low sun angles, flow all the way across that area and would bring some delight to it that you really only have at the moment that you're showing this picture, you know, not when the sun is turning around the building. So I suggest that you consider that possibility. Few other comments. But just to, you know, it doesn't have to be at ground level. That could be all the way up at the top of, or the second bay of the wall itself. But it also gives some additional kind of variety to the view of the side of the building where you're just looking at a blank wall. Just have a few more comments here. I don't know why we have a big blank area in the top here where there's middle between the two trees that are there. Why isn't it possible to put one more tree? And so you'd get one and then three, you know, it seems like it's something that's missing. The height, okay, the fixtures, the hanging fixtures, I mean, the cigar fixtures that are hanging. I honestly think that you could do better than that. You know, that there are some light fixtures out there which are much more interesting sculpturally. And it's an opportunity that you're missing by just providing these hanging lights. They're sort of too boring for me to the entry. And there are people out there designing light fixtures all the time. And I suggest go take a look at ones especially made in Italy. They seem to do best with playing with light, the shape of light fixtures. You do something that would really kind of catch people's eyes. And the cigars are just, they're low to the area, but I think even maybe just one really larger one in the center might be a better way to do that. But you can explore that further, I'm sure. What I said about the last building, I say about this one too. You know, you have a way to get out on these balconies, but what about the rest of the people within? You know, it's unfortunate that every one of these office buildings is hermetically sealed from the outside. You can open the ends, as you pointed out, where it's possible to bring in air through the balconies. It seems like you do that on the right-hand side. I'm not sure if the left-hand side does exactly the same thing, but isn't it possible to have a more operable windows and bring in some of this wonderful Palo Alto air to the inside? Heather, I pointed out that I was in the Woolworth building in New York, and can you believe we had double hung windows? So I think that those are all my comments. I just want to say that my favorite drawing is actually the bicycle storage room. That's a really fantastic image that you have of this guy just hung up his bike and the bikes are hanging on the wall. You know, overall, I'd get back to my first comments, you know, and say that I think that you've done a really good job, that all the enframements, now I guess they're all the same. And I think that the color of the painted steel color as the eyebrow around all the bigger openings is a terrific idea. The fact that you've pulled the building on the left forward, the fact that, you know, the rest of the building is of a different color except for the enframements. But most importantly, change the ground 2 floors in the middle and expose the material that's looks like it is exposed in this elevation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch or Vice Chair Hirsch. Board Member Bolte.
Thank you, Osma. Thank you, Architect Young. This is a project I can support recommending approval for. I think it's got a lot of good things going for it. If you don't mind, Osma, I'd like to understand David's concern with the central part of the middle 2 stories of the facade. David, I'm just trying still to figure out what you're really trying to say. So if I look at some of the architectural details, there's some sectional details through that on sheet A30. And I'm looking at detail number 2, which is the new proposed cross-section through this curtain wall. I think what you're saying is that the glazed assembly, but on the first and second floor, the recessed part of it, doesn't have any physical manifestation of this floor structure. And that's what you'd like to see, is some sort of break and extension of that. Some sort of reveal or piece. What they have is some sort of a light box, they're calling it, a shadow box, which is really just an aluminum extrusion as part of the glazing system.
Are you able to zoom in to detail number 2, where the floor meets the glazing? The second floor meets the glazing? Just on detail on the left.
So David, can you point out to me where?
So you can kind of see the mullions right there, I think.
It's all glazed. The whole face of this building is just glazed.
So you're saying there's no, it's all just.
The second floor does not express itself on the outside of the building.
So they're
all
showing
glass.
They're showing different metal channels and extrusions and stuff
Yeah.
on there.
It's all glass.
Can we ask the architect to address that question?
Yeah, just to clarify what is visible. It kind of, I think I had a question earlier if there was spandrel there that maybe I forgot to ask.
It is still a double height curtain wall system. The 2 horizontal mullions that you're seeing above and below the concrete are backed with a aluminum panel here, so that you're not seeing the concrete slab. Unfortunately, David, the character of the existing concrete slab is irregular, and we need to provide acoustic and environmental sealant between the 2 floors. So we have this spandrel condition instead. The images, you can also see that existing concrete stem wall out here, we had to extend the wall above that. The other component is that depending on the angle of light and the time of day, this horizontal spandrel will read very prominently as a horizontal line across the 2-story extent of the facade. It's a very lively and animated facade, actually.
Just to clarify, is it spandrel or is it a clear glass with an aluminum backing behind
Correct.
the mullions?
It's the same glazing as into the 2 office spaces, and then there's a back set aluminum panel. So you see through the glass to the back set panel.
And that panel is painted the same color as all the other metal things that are painted, like the gray?
I think so, but Aaron, if you are able to unmic or unmute and remind me of the correct answer to that.
Yeah, we intentionally, what we tried to do is we actually tried to replicate the concrete initially, and as Heather mentioned, we had challenges with that. We were trying to keep that as a lighter tone, so it would be more similar to the lighter tone above, where the shadow boxes are around the windows, not the darker tone of the concrete or of the columns.
Yes. And yes, that was Aaron's 14-month-old daughter helping to explain the project.
That was an adorable answer.
Yes.
And also just to clarify that this glazing is more clear and less mirror-like than the existing glazing on the project.
Oh my God, the existing is mirror glass, and this is incredibly transparent, as you can see in the sample on the material board. It's a very high performance glass, and the, I'm blanking on the name of it.
Fire.
Thank you. Yes, that actually is a low iron glass, which even takes more of the green that you typically see in clear glass out of it. It's incredibly transparent.
Thank you, Architect Young. I think David brings up a good point. I'm not sure if it's that big a deal ultimately. I can support the project either way. I can support my colleagues looking for some sort of a comeback on just this one detail here. But overall, I think it's impressive what the changes you've made to this building. The materials are wonderful. It's going to be a big improvement on the building. I have two things to mention. One is that I'm concerned about having two bicycle racks right next to the entry doors. It's a 16-foot wide area, and having two bicycles on either side of that. I know it's great to have bicycles next to doors for bicyclists, but I don't know if I want to look at somebody else's bicycle as I walk in the door. And that actually reduces it down to a width that's less than generous. It's 16 feet total minus the width of two bicycles, or four bicycles potentially. And it seems to me, I'm looking at some of your details, and you folks seem to have had a similar thought. There's a detail, the one David brought up on sheet A26, where you're showing a bicycle rack out in the front of the building along the sidewalk more. And that seems to me a much more appropriate place to put these bike racks. So I'm sure this is something that you and staff have negotiated and argued, and your clients and everybody else has an opinion, but I'm just offering mine, and whatever you guys decide is ultimately fine. But if it were my building, I wouldn't want bicycles right by the front door.
Can you clarify which sheet is showing the location of the bicycle?
826 is an elevation, is a...
Can I jump in, Peter?
It's not on the floor plan though.
No, it's not. On the floor plan does not show this, but on the rendering, it shows a bike rack there. And I'm quite familiar with the software Heather uses, and it's impossible to have it only on a rendering. At one point, it was on the floor plan.
A little unclear where that is on the floor plan though. Is that?
That's the area David was talking about in the middle of the building.
I see.
I apologize. The rendering on A2.26 was prior to transportation's requirement that we relocate the bike racks to be solely on the project property and not in the sidewalk as you're seeing here.
Heather, I really don't want to get between you and approval on bicycle racks. You guys have to work that out. I'm just offering my 2 cents worth. David is eager
on this one because it was one item that I forgot
David
to
would like
mention.
to chime in for a second, if that's okay.
Sorry.
I was just going to say it's not there on the ground anymore. That's what Heather was saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. The plans are correct.
Okay.
I just want to, about the bikes, I think that you have the, just adjacent to the projection of the kind of the office space through the wall at that point, at the entry on the cover sheet here, you have this one sort of additional bench piece. Consider that would be a kind of I think if there's enough depth to have the bicycles fit there, wouldn't that be a reasonable place to locate bicycles?
Again, Aaron should correct me if I misspeak, but I believe that we tried that and that the required width on both sides of the bike rack went over the property line and didn't allow us to have the 2 bike spaces that are required. And so the proposal that you see is the unhappy alternate that we've negotiated with transportation.
Okay.
I'm so confused. Are there bicycles on this ground floor plan?
Yes.
Where are they?
I will point you to them in 1 second here. They are right here and right here. Those are the bike racks. And again, I apologize. The rendering does show a bike rack here. That was our initial proposal, and the rendering was created to support the initial proposal. We overlooked updating it when the bike racks moved to their new location. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay, thank you. I thought that was a dimension string on A9. I apologize. I can see where they are now. I'm sorry, Board Member Bolton.
No worries, no worries. Again, I think it's unfortunate to have bicycles there, but you have to pick the battles you fight. So I'd like to talk about the design enhancement exception. In this case, I can recommend supporting that design enhancement exception. However, I do want to come back, Ozma, to the written findings, because I cannot support the way staff is justifying them. But I can find that because this is an existing building, that's an exceptional circumstance particular to this property. Clearly, they add to the architectural quality of the building by letting additional daylight, and they are clearly minor in this case. So I can support them on that account. I would like to come back when we get to the findings. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I have comments on the findings too. Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. I'm actually struggling with this project a little bit. I'm having a hard time making findings 2 and 3. Finding 2 requires us to find that there's a unified and coherent design. And I think what I'm struggling with is that the original building has a really strong partie. It's got a really strong, I mean, obviously it's based on the Villa Savoie, which we all learned parties from really, but there's something very clean and crisp about the original design. And I think what I'm struggling with this is that it's like 3 different buildings. The facade has been broken into 3 that are kind of put together, and they don't feel coherent to me. They don't feel like they have a coherent design. They feel like 3 different things. And I struggle with that, especially with this entrance, the main entrance, which I understand, the goal is to try and make this entrance more inviting. It's being flanked by 2 columns of 2 different materials. And typically entrances sort of have a coherence where you're going through something that is a consistent thing versus 2 different things. I really like how clean, the existing columns are, and cladding them in these sort of metal plates, which I understand gives it more orthogonality. But I kind of worry how that detail resolves at the top. I think it actually makes the project bulkier. The existing building feels very light and airy, and I think also that's in part due to Board Member Hirsch kind of made a mention of that corner at the ground floor at the entry is open currently, and in our proposal it's closed. And I do think that openness makes it more inviting, and I do think those curves really bring your eye to the entry. It makes you want to walk that way. And in the proposal in front of us, that's blocked. And so I don't know that it's achieving the goals that are being set out in this project. So I struggle with that. Let me see if I can keep going here. This is also on a southern facing side, and it doesn't appear that there's any shading elements. I do think that's really important. In addition to operable windows, as mentioned by Vice Chair Hirsch, these are sort of things with passive design that, if we're doing a facade renovation, those are things we should aim for. So I do think shading would be a good idea. I struggle with the material palette as well. The existing building is it's got sort of warm tones with sort of the red accent, and the tones in front of us are really cold. They're a very cool palette, and in some ways make the project in front of us almost more brutalist in some ways because of this sort of mimicking of the concrete. And I love brutalist architecture, don't get me wrong. But I do want to mention that that's something that I'm not sure is meeting the goals of the project. So I can't make finding number 2 for the coherent design, and I can't make finding number 3 because the materials don't feel compatible with the area. So I can support the DEE. So in that case, I do think it is improving. I agree with Board Member Balte that it does improve the building, and it is a sort of very special circumstance. So I can support the DEE. Now that I know where those bicycles are, I don't mind them.
You never saw a bike rack you didn't like.
I really appreciate that there's benches in the front. I do think there are successful things that are happening here, but as an overall, I don't think I can support this project right now. And I do want to sort of, you know, alert these things to my board members that, you know, these facades stay for a long time. I think it's important that we find a way to meet findings 2 and 3 where the facade is coherent and is connected. And I do think there are things like potentially if the operable windows things stick, there could be something that kind of connects the different glazing types that happen across the top of the building. I feel bad kind of saying critique, but this is how I feel, and not how I feel, but also kind of objectively what I'm seeing in front of me. So I do want to sort of put it to my other board members that this is important, and I think we need to look at this a bit more critically, because this is an important part of Cal Ave. You know, we're just talking about Cal Ave. It's really close to the Molly Stones, and people are going to see this, and it's going to, you know, I think currently the building that's there is, I found it to be quite inviting, and I understand that it's dated and should be brought into the 21st century, but I don't know that the solution in front of us is doing that. So are there any responses?
You know, the Villa Savoie is set off on a big grassy field. You see it from a long ways away, and it's a great work, classic work of architecture. It's a terrible model for an office building on Cambridge Avenue. And that's what we're struggling with. I mean, the original partie is good. And were I taxed with this problem, I would probably want to just focus on the materials rather than trying to make it into 3 different buildings. That said, every building we review on Cambridge Avenue, we want to see this kind of breaking up, add more texturality, push the ins and outs. They've gone through incredible lengths to get a little bit more reveal on the facade depth. My way of thinking is that, yes, it's not a perfect solution, Ozma. It's unfortunate you can't just keep the Villa Savoie, but it's really inappropriate where it is. And I think this is better than what we're looking at. I also think that this is the second time they've presented something to us. And, you know, the owner is only going to go so far. They should update this building. We want them to keep these type of buildings rather than tearing it down and putting a new, taller building with more floors in it. This building keeps the existing tenants. It keeps those existing buildings and fabric of our group, and we should be supporting that. And there's a price to pushing too hard for the perfect, I think, which is, I think, what I hear you're really wanting. And so that's where I'm concerned. I fully agree and share your gut concern. And the partie is not bad what's there. It's inappropriate. And it might be a different approach that you could take. But I'm not sure this is the time and place to push for that.
With all due respect, what is the partie of this?
Well, it's the Villa Savoie. I mean, the tall floating.
No, for the proposal in front of us, which doesn't look anything.
You're right. It's very hard to define. It's trying to be 3 different pieces, 3 separate buildings, so to speak, 2 set forward and 1 set back. And they don't really have enough room to express that properly. They're trying to remove that 200-foot long horizontal element and break it into 3 vertical pieces. So the partie fails on that account, of course.
Do you feel like the facade is a coherent design?
I'm not going to answer that question.
It is finding number 3.
I hear you. I hear you.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts, Vice Chair Hirsch?
Yeah, you know, you bring a good issue because it replaces a single image building. And it breaks it down into different pieces, but the pieces are, maybe they're not the best building in town, but I think it's an improvement to change the scale of something as long as this. You know, you never ever see this elevation anyhow. You just can't conceive of it, except maybe from the extreme angles at the ends. But you're walking along next to it. And so but I want to say that I can't approve the project unless it expresses the 1st to 2nd floor divisions the way I described it before. I think it's part of the scale breaking down possibility here, that it changes the verticality of that first floor single glazed kind of element into its pieces, and it represents the building that really is there. And it doesn't compromise that once you do express the second floor in the middle, the way I think it ought to be expressed, the way it looks on A17 with the expression of what is in the middle and where the columns are behind, so that the windows now are of a smaller element. They aren't a plane of glass anymore. I think that is required.
How does that relate to any of our findings? Can you talk, because we can't suggest changes unless they have a relationship to our findings. Our findings are in packet page.
Look at the book.
So, and if I could just clarify, this project, this is the first hearing for this project, first formal hearing. They did not have a preliminary review, although it is a minor architecture review. And so we would normally do up to two hearings, just for clarification on the process.
But we saw Heather Young's firm present something else for this building 8 months ago, 6 months ago.
No, it wasn't this building. I don't remember seeing this building before.
There was one on Cal Ave. That's just a block away. Maybe you're thinking of that one.
Peter and David, we met with you individually to preview the more conceptual project, but it was not part of a formal application.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. So fair enough then, it hasn't been publicly vetted. Thank you, Architect Young, for making that point. So then I should be disclosing that I met with the architect quite some time ago with a totally different proposal for this project. Whatever.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had to wonder
I
if
thought
there
it
was
here in front of the board that we'd seen this, but obviously not. So, oh boy. Okay.
pandemic blurs things.
So I will comment to you, Ozma, that my red pen has been all over the findings for finding number 2 that you're talking about, because I felt what staff wrote was just not supporting that finding. And then I tried like crazy to write down what I thought would make it work. And I couldn't find words to bring that finding that I thought would work, but I figured we'd figure it out now. So I hear what you're saying.
So Ozma, I think under finding number 3, I could state it that it is a higher aesthetic quality when the scale of the building is broken down the way it has been here, that using high quality integrated materials, and there are a greater variety of materials provided here, so that certainly adds to that. Construction techniques. This is something where I think the piece of construction of a full 2-story high glass wall isn't appropriate. In the colors, there's a change in the color definition of that wall. And compatibility with enhancing the neighborhood surroundings. I think it's more scaled to the neighborhood buildings that are around it. Or on that block, which none of them are as long as this very one building as it is expressed originally. So I find that finding 3 satisfies me.
Yeah, that you're not able to make finding number 3. The other thing, David, about your note is I think the reason I struggle with your suggestion is not because I don't think it necessarily it's a bad suggestion. It's really that I struggle with how it incorporates with the greater design concept for what's in front of us. Because what I see in front of us, if I were to give it, like a try, I mean, I heard from the applicant, the goals for this design are to bring it to the 21st century. They want large glass openings and they want to strip it down to something clean, crisp, and simple. And the design in front of us, I mean, the double-story glass is simple. And if we were to, so that's the thing with the party, I struggle because it seems like it's trying to do something like what's in the existing building where there's this double-story glass on the ground and then sort of an object on the third story that's floating above it. If we decide to move forward or like support your suggestion, David, then that partie falls apart. And so unless there's like a design, like a conceptually strong design reason to do that, other than to break down scale, I'm not sure I can support your suggestion. And it might be just because the partie of the building is not clear because it's like 3 different buildings currently sandwiched together. So I don't know if you have anything to add on David's suggestion.
Sorry, what was David's suggestion then?
It's about expressing the floor in the glass.
Oh, well, I think he's correct that the glass would be better if you just had 2 curtain windows and 1 piece of floor coming out or something more physical to create a shadow line. But I don't think that's really the big issue here. What I'm struggling with, though, is most the point you're bringing up, or David too, is it a coherent, unified design? The current building is, obviously. I can make finding number 3 easily, but it's finding number 2 is a legitimate question. I still stand that I'm ready to approve this today. But I do respect what you're saying, Rosma.
Are there thoughts on the material palette? I made a comment about how it's a lot colder than what is currently on site. Any comments on the material palette?
Are you asking me or the board?
The board, sorry.
Oh, I apologize.
I'm very comfortable with those warm gray tones. I find it okay. And I think the resista or the wood paneling will be a nice offset to that. I don't have an issue with the colors of the materials.
Vice Chair Hirsch?
Yes, I'm struggling with my light. I'm more or less okay with the materials. I might have asked for a stronger relationship between the entry, but I think overall they're pretty close. So I have no issue with the materials, except that it ought to continue on the framing of the office wall behind the columns in the middle of the building. Looks good in perspective elevation.
Okay. I still think the materials aren't that compatible with the area. They just feel a little cold. Okay, so we've got some thoughts here. We do have to make a motion on this item. So would anybody like to make a motion?
I move that we recommend approval of this project as submitted.
Is there a second? Motion fails.
Okay, thanks.
I move that we continue this project to a date uncertain.
Second that.
Okay, motion by Thompson, seconded by Hirsch.
And I will conduct the vote call. Yeah, Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes,
Motion carries 3-0.
I realized I didn't summarize all of our points. Is that something you'd like me to do? Okay, I'm sorry. Is the board okay if we, even though we did our vote?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
just
please. It's
summarize
great what
our
you're doing.
Points. Okay, we might need to do some straw polls here. So the main item was that we were not able to make finding number 2. The design was not unified or coherent. We might recommend the architect consider unifying some of the facade in a coherent partie. Does that sound about right? Okay. The other item was that we weren't able to make finding number 3. Would the board be open to asking the applicant to consider alternate materials? I'm hearing a yes from Board Member Balte.
Say it again.
Considering alternate materials that might be more warmer and compatible with the neighborhood.
Alternative materials.
Like from this board.
I'm not sure compatible with the neighborhood has a whole lot of meaning, Osman. There's all kinds of stuff down there, but you're asking for a warmer tone, and I think that's a fair request.
I don't find it's necessary.
Okay. Still 2 out of 3. So I might put it on there.
I'm sorry, say this again. I'm trying to be neutral here, so I don't want to be casting between
We're
it.
just asking them to consider it.
I'm fine with them considering a warmer palette of materials.
You are considering a warmer palette.
Well, to
Asking
consider
them.
a warmer palette. Okay.
I'm okay with
I'm
that.
fine with
Okay.
the palette of materials as it is, but I'm fine considering a warmer palette as well.
That's okay by me too.
All right, Hirsch agrees. Okay, warm materials. To consider operable windows.
Definitely for me.
Okay, yes.
Mhm. Could I change that to be more operable windows? They do have some.
Yes, that's right. That's fine. To consider, maybe this is too much. Was considering shading too much?
Well, consider it is fine.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a point well made.
There's more than one way to do shading. It could be on the inside of the building, of course, with blinds or drapes or whatever,
It's less
something.
effective, so,
Not as effective.
yeah.
And I'm not sure that the design of the way the shadow boxes are defined here really would allow for kind of that sort of shading that you could see in a building that has a flat profile and an extension over the window or around the window individually. So I can't really go along with that right now. I think the shading could be handled differently.
Okay. So consider shading is okay with you then?
Consider shading, but it could be on the inside.
Osman, why don't you give up on this one, okay?
I think
We're trying to get
it
a
would help,
compromise here.
honestly. I think it would help make their design more coherent. That's only why I suggested, but also for sustainability reasons.
It's in conflict with the shadow box idea for the windows.
But those already happen in an inset part.
They happen quite a bit around each of the large span of windows.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking about the parts of the glass that are up against the face of the facade that are unshaded.
Well, let me just say, consider it.
Consider, yes. So easy.
Okay.
You can say
That's
you
good
considered it. Anything else that you'd like me to add to this list?
Yes, I mean, consider.
Consider relocating the bicycles someplace else.
Yes,
Fine, but not too far away. Okay.
yes, that's important.
All right, we consider bicycle location.
Consider expressing the second floor in the middle of the building.
Can I say in as far as it meets the design concept for the building?
No,
I agree with David, Osman. Just
Really? You guys just
Consider-
want to ask them to do something that doesn't make any connection to the rest of the design?
consider expressing the second floor.
All right, 2 out of 3.
That's right. 2 out of 3, Osman.
Don't say I don't believe in democracy. Anything else that I missed? Anything else?
Which was stated, consider opening the end wall.
Yeah, the corner wall to bring in
Yeah.
more light to make
Yes.
that entry more inviting. I would support them
Mhm.
considering that.
And normally you would, Osman, you would say something about a blank wall on the side. You would say more about that,
Yeah, and there's some opportunities. It could be like,
It's an existing building, gang. They're not going to do anything.
No, but
Just
they're
let them.
closing up
They're
the.
closing
Okay,
up
so
an
the part they're
existing
closing
there.
off or not, we can push
Yeah.
on, but the rest of the blank wall is
Okay.
existing
oh
on
yeah,
the side of
no,
the
we're
building.
not addressing that.
Okay, good. Yeah. Let's
And
just
I think if
leave
there's
well
a
enough alone.
desire to have something there, like you said, it could be like a punched opening or something to create more light in there. It doesn't have to, we're not asking to get rid of anything out there, but
Mhm.
consider it. Is that everything? Okay. Is that good enough, Steph?
Yes, that's perfect. Just wondering if the applicant has any questions.
Sure. there any questions from the applicant?
Sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting. No questions from me. I would like to make a special thank you to Sam Gutierrez, who's been working with me and our team on this project for quite some time. I understand that tomorrow is his last day, and we all wish him well on his future endeavors. Thank you, Sam.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks for that, Heather. Appreciate it.
That's so sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Can I point out to the staff, please, when we make the findings for the DEE ultimately, finding number 1 is regarding there being something special and unique about this property or circumstance. I'd really like to be sure that the finding directly focuses on that. What's written in these findings now, I think, does not. And to me, at least, the fact that it's an existing building is really what's unique and certain special about this circumstance. And I just want to be careful with what precedents we set. So that's just for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So it is 12:05. We've been wanting to try and end these meetings at noon. The next item on our agenda, item number 4, is likely to be a very lengthy item. I wanted to kind of gauge if it's possible, either from staff or the board, to consider moving this item.
So we do have our consultant ready, and I'd have to see if she's available on another date. And probably more importantly, March 22nd, we were going to have our second community meeting before we go back to council. And I think we were just hoping to have the ARB weigh in before that time period.
Is it conceivable that we could have like interim, like, I don't know if, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know if this is even feasible, but I know we meet every other week, potentially. I don't know if people are free next week, if that's an option at all.
I'm certainly willing to have a special meeting. I feel, Osma, that if we don't speak on this issue, we're just not going to get heard.
Yeah.
So I do think we should be part of it whenever we can.
So we could look at March 10th. I don't know from the city calendar. We do have HRB on the opposite Thursdays.
So it would have to be like a different time.
Do we know for HRB how many items? Okay. Okay, so it might just be one item on the HRB agenda. So if we started later in the morning, we might be able to do something like that.
Okay.
And I do see it, it looks like the consultant is Jean Iceberg, looks to be available on the 10th, unless she writes me differently.
So I do have a meeting conflict at that time, but I can see if I can get someone to cover for me. But yeah. And the alternative is that we take a break. I don't know what the afternoon schedule is if we were to keep going today.
I'm here as long as I need to be.
Yeah, I'd rather just get it done, Osma.
You'd rather do it
If
today?
you can fit, unless you have a real hard stop, it's up to you. You're the chair.
I think the work plan,
Can maybe get shifted off.
yeah, I think we do want to get that to council in April, but you know, we do have the next hearing.
Okay.
So maybe we switch that instead.
Okay.
Jean saying next week would be better for her, but
Next what? Okay.
yeah, I think if,
I do think if we can do next week, I do think that would be better. I'm saying that knowing that I already have a conflict, but I will try to organize that in advance. I wasn't able to reorganize my conflict that I have today. So I guess next week on Thursday, if we could do that on the 10th. I'm sorry to
think-
push this off.
Do we need to make a motion and vote for that kind of thing? I think you do, don't you?
Yes, a motion would be helpful. And then just Board Member Balte, would you be available?
My calendar shows me available, yes.
Okay.
So
And
I don't
Board
know.
Member Hirsch, okay.
Osman, you make the motion now.
Okay, I move that we discuss item number 4 next week at our special meeting. Actually, items number 4 and 5. Okay,
I will
Yeah.
second that motion.
And I will conduct the roll call vote. Board Member Balte,
Yes,
Vice Chair Hirsch, Chair Thompson,
yes,
motion carries 3-0.
thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being accommodating. Okay, our last item is the approval of our minutes, or our next item is the approval of minutes for February 3rd.
standing on the edge of a cliff, I will move that we approve these minutes as presented.
Is there a second? Okay, motion by Balte. I'll second.
Board Member Balte,
Yes,
Vice Chair Hirsch, Chair Thompson,
Yes,
motion carries 3-0.
thank you.
So did we skip the work plan?
We're moving that to next week too.
Okay,
So
we
we'll-
made a motion for that as well,
Yeah, the motion was to move items 4 and 5
to
to
move
next
both of
week.
them. Okay.
And then I don't believe we have any subcommittee items. Our next item is board member question, comments, and announcements. I have one. We need to put together our annual report. And in this case, it's a double annual report because it'll be from 2020 through the end of 2021. Typically, we're supposed to do this by our bylaws. We're supposed to put out a report of our findings over the last 2 years. Peter spearheaded the one before I became chair. So it's a report that needs to get done that hasn't gotten done. And I forget, so last time, Peter, did you just draft it up and put it in the staff report? for people?
yes. I had worked closely with Win Firth, the chair prior to me, and we had come up with an informal concept that the chair of the committee would draft the report in the December at the end of their term, roughly speaking, or at the end of the chair's term, with a prior consultation with the board for topics that they thought were important. But the chair was responsible for actually doing the writing, and then we'd circulate and try to massage as necessary and come to consensus. So it wasn't something that was delegated. It was a chair's responsibility, Osma. That's why I voted
It's
for
an
you
annual
for chair.
thing.
Well, the idea was really at the end of each chair's term. The chair was summarizing the work that went on during their tenure as chair.
I think that might be a different thing. So in our bylaws, it does say not less than 1 year.
That's right. That's right. But it says the chair is for a term of 1 year too.
Oh, does that mean we need to shuffle up? Because I think I've been chair for longer than a
Yeah,
year.
I think you're talking about the same thing. The annual report comes from the chair, and there had just been, we had decided that at the end of the chair's position that they would do that sort of summary,
Okay,
which is the ARB annual report, which is different from council's work plan,
right.
which we can talk about on the 10th too, as far as like, do we want to put those two things together?
Yeah, I think it's fair to put those in the same discussion. At
Okay,
least I have some ideas about this work plan the council's asking about.
sure.
And so that could be something that on the 10th, I can add that to the agenda.
Yeah, the annual report.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know when my term ends? Or I guess, like, are we, I don't want to,
I think we, we recently installed a vice chair. And so I can go back and take a look at that.
It's traditionally been the beginning of a new year, so in January. I think the council in their new boards and commissions handbook had wanted it to become in June.
Oh.
The cycle starting in June, and so you were going to carry through to June, which is what I think makes sense for us as a board now, with David only so recently being as the chair. But I'd leave it to staff to sort out what they think is right. But the chair is supposed to circulate every year.
yeah.
The dates have changed several times over the years, which is why I don't have it at the ready.
Okay. All right, we can discuss it next week. Okay, any other comments? All good. All right, well, thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.